And we're live. Perfect. Well, Matt, thanks again for joining me. For anyone who doesn't know, this is Matt Salton. Me and Matt have been, we've been close friends for what, almost going on 2 decades now, getting
Yeah,
up there.
close there. Yeah.
I'd say we were probably in middle school or towards the end of middle school, so eighth grade. I think that's when we kind of discovered our little group that we're still all friends together with. And so, obviously, we've played sports together over the years. We went to the same college, even though I took a more elongated route than everyone else did to get there. But and now we kind of do other adventures together outside of that, and are still best friends to this day. So I think it's only right that I have you on as the first official guest of the podcast. You and me have had tons and tons of talks throughout the years about in-depth conversations that I think that other people can benefit from hearing those. So you were my clear first choice to bring it on when I decided I wanted to do all this. So but thank you again. So but for anyone who doesn't know, could you give a brief interview or brief explanation of who you are and kind of anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, we've been best friends for the better part of, 15, 20 years. I didn't meet you guys in our friend group until, probably, like you said, end of middle school. So, and we're fortunate enough to still be friends with all those guys today. That's not something that a lot of people get to have, especially with the size of friend group we have with, 12, 15 people that still
Yeah.
connect quite often. So, but yeah, no, I met you in school and we had sports and, obviously we still have, our friendship now. We have other ventures now that we're getting old. But
No.
yeah, no. As far as me as a person, I've kind of just always gone through life. I thought I had everything I planned exactly how I wanted, and then life throws you some curveballs, and you realize maybe that's not what you wanted all along. And I love having these types of conversations. So I'm honored, you have me on, especially this early. But you know me, I love to yap, but especially about things that matter. And I just, like you said, I feel like those types of conversations are missing in society a lot nowadays. So, but yeah, as far as me as a person, I mean, um, in my free time, it's working on other business ventures or workout or just honestly just work on self improvement. And between that, hanging out with friends, hanging out with my girlfriend, that's about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you've always been a very humble human being. But from your up and come from knowing you since you were a kid, for anyone who doesn't know, this is a 6'5" blonde gentleman who's got like 10% body fat and just ripped out of his mind. So he's taken though. So
Trying.
don't get any ideas, anybody out there. But you're an extremely hardworking, dedicated person. When you find something that you truly love to do or something that you think makes you better, people around you better, you definitely give 110%. So it's something that I've always admired about you, and that's why we continue the relationship that we have now. So, but yeah, both growing up in Spencer. I mean, football was kind of our biggest. I would say sports that we did together. We tried to get you to play soccer and all that fun stuff, but that didn't go out the way we wanted to. We got you for indoor for
Yeah,
a little
we go
bit,
for indoor.
so and then we played a little flag football in college too. Even though we always try to convince you to try and walk on to SDSU, life took its own
Yeah.
course, and but that's okay. So, but yeah, I mean this is hopefully gonna reach out to enough people. Like I've only started the social medias a week ago, and I mean it's not nothing crazy, but had 100 views here, 100 views there, and just short little intros. So I'm just trying to build a brand in the sense of trying to have a safe place for people to come and talk and express who they are, and I think that hopefully we can do that together. So
Yeah.
but yeah, like I said too, in my intro, I want this to be an open dialogue. So like you said, we can sit here and have a good, honest conversation rather than me just sit here and ask you questions and sit not say anything back. But if you ever have any questions too, please let me know as
Yeah,
we get
absolutely.
going through it. So,
Yeah.
well, let's get into it. So the first question that I think is very important that kind of gets our feet wet is when you look into the future, what is the vision that pulls you forward? What is that thing that gets you out of bed every single morning that says, "Hey, this is my purpose and this is what's going to get me going"?
Yeah, exactly. Definitely, man. So, you know me, like we said, 15, 20 years, so you know exactly how I work. I find what I want, figure out what I want, and then set out a plan to, achieve those things, right? I thought at the age of 16 I knew everything that I wanted out of life. And, some of those things still hold true, but some of those things have drastically changed, as I've aged now. I'm, 11 years later. But to me, what keeps me going in life, or what keeps me, pulling me day in, day out to, keep working towards my goals, is honestly there's a few things, but I think the main thing is just the desire to want to be better. Someone's always going to be better at you than this and that, look better than you, make more money than you, whatever you want to, whatever, parameters you want to put on it. Someone's always going to be better, and that's okay. But only you know the true, pinnacle of life that you can achieve. The true peak, the true potential that you can fulfill. So that's been huge for me, specifically over the last like 5 or 6 years. I've really been focusing on doing that. Just focusing on what I can do to make me better, and because honestly, if you make yourself better for you, all it's going to end up doing is making you a better, for me, a better son, a better brother, a better friend, a better boyfriend, all those things, right? If you can make yourself better, the impact you're going to have on others is also going to be better. So, that's big for me. So as far as a day-to-day thing, what keeps me going, it's that drive just to be the best version of me that I can be, right? But as far as like future goal and like the thing, like what I kind of view as my like desired purpose, and what will fulfill me the most out of life, right? Because I feel like people always have, and some people don't know that right away. Some people do. Some people, you figure it out over 5, 10 year span, and sometimes it changes. That's okay. But for me, it's always been the same simple thing of, and I'm gonna say simple, but it's not simple to achieve, but it seems simple in the terms of how I lay it out. My biggest goal in life has genuinely always been to be the best husband and best father I could possibly be. I had that mindset at the age of 16, which is obviously, obviously didn't want to achieve that at that age, but like I've always known since 16 that's what I wanted to be, right? And I'll tell people that, and they'll go, you know, that's a pretty basic or simple, goal, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and that would be fair to say in the sense that almost everyone achieves that as far as being a husband and or a father. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are a good husband or father, or um, fulfill the potential that they have to be that. And for me, that's just always been my goal. I think I value nothing in this life more than my relationships with people, whether that be, my significant other, my friends, my family, whoever that may be. I truly believe that you don't you don't get to take anything with you after this life. So the things that you can actually hold on to would be your relationships with people and the memories you make through experiences. Those are the only things in my mind. So,
Yeah.
like I said, when I lay out my biggest goal of being, wanting to be the best husband and best father possible, okay, well, where does that start? Well, you know, it's these habits that are developed and these things that you learn from day-to-day experiences, day-to-day, just mindsets, all those things. So it correlates with me in the sense of, I want to become the best version of me I can be. Yes, that's for me, but it rolls over to my future family that I hope to have one day. Um, so yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing that pulls me forward in this life. And only for me, only God knows what He has in store for me. But that is my ultimate goal, and I'm gonna do what I can do and control what I can control, and work towards that goal that I have for myself, day in and day out.
Yeah, I saw a quote the other day that said that it was a doctor who he saw or thousands and thousands of people on their deathbed, and he says that not one person, when they're about to take their final breath, wants their trophies, their accolades, their money, nothing next to them. They want the people that they love,
Yeah.
and I think that's always been, it resonates with me, is that no matter what you achieve in this life, the greatest achievement is going to be the legacy that you leave behind. And I think that you completely agree with that. And to your point, yeah, it's not, and I think what people want to get confused is that, oh, I gotta, when you talk about people wanting a family and all those things, like you said, they're like, oh, I gotta start at like 16. I gotta find my significant other right away. I gotta start a family right away and do all these things. But I think what people honestly misinterpret a lot of the times is that you have to know who you are and you have to be your true self before you can find the person that complete or helps you out the best in life. So
Yeah.
I have been extremely blessed to have such a wonderful wife and a wonderful person in my life with Darian, but she has seen the best and worst out of me in the last 10 years we've been together, and I am very, very lucky to have that, but a lot of the times it doesn't work that way. There's been many times where she could have just said, fuck this, Dylan, he's not himself. I didn't fall in love with this person and just left, but rather than she saw the potential of what I could be and decided to stick around. Thank the gods.
Yeah.
But and so I think for a lot of people out there, if you're like, oh my God, I'm just stressing on trying to get this, that, and the other thing, I think you're a perfect example of that. You need time to develop who you want to be and who you are to reach that ultimate goal. Because if you go into it half-assed, or you go into it of like, oh, I kind of know myself, or I kind of know what I want, let's just dive into this deep relationship and, intermingle two lives that aren't supposed to be together, then that could cause not only a ton of time waste, but also just a ton of emotional damage. So I think that's a big thing to take away from it too, is that, yeah, you don't need to rush into these types of things, and focus on yourself, truly understand who you are and what you want out of this life, and then go after it. So I think
Yeah.
that's phenomenal.
I kind of
Um,
go ahead.
no, yeah, please.
I was gonna say I kind of view it as this, like if you and like I said, I've got a couple other buddies that are the same way as me. They've known what they've wanted out of life as far as like that main purpose or fulfillment for the longest time. But at the same time, there's a giant group of people that actually have no idea what they want, and that's okay too, as long as you aren't. I don't want to say wasting time, but you're proactively trying new things to figure out not only what you want to do, but more of honestly who you are. And when it comes to the partner thing, not everyone in life wants a partner, and that's a-okay.
Right.
But if that is your main goal, you know, why would you either half-ass or, I would say lower your standards or accept something if it's not, if you only have to get it right once in life, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Unfortunately, there's a ton of reasons that, the divorce rate is the way that it is. And the truth of the matter is the divorce thing, it's really not necessarily one person's fault in that partnership sometimes it's you both got into something too early, or you had false expectations and false promises, and that can be scary for sure, but
Yeah.
at the same time too, like, and again, this doesn't just go for partnerships, but if it's anything that you truly want in life, you're going to have to take a risk to get it. And my thought is like, regrets are one thing, but like, would you rather play it safe and you're, let's say 60 years from now you're in your deathbed and you're like, man, I never took that risk and I wonder what would have happened, or take the risk, and the even if it goes wrong per se, you can bounce back and pivot off of that. In my humble opinion, like, I really view everything in life either as a lesson or a blessing. So if it's a blessing, you get what you wanted, even if you didn't know you wanted it. And if it's a lesson, it's something where, you didn't exactly get the outcome that you wanted, but you learned from it. And that was honestly a blessing in disguise itself. So that's kind of the way that I kind of approach every situation and every scenario in my life. And, since I've adopted that mindset, things have become, I wouldn't say easier, because you're hypercritical and you look and think about a lot of things, but
Yeah.
it really helps keep direction in your life, I would say.
Yeah, I think what you were saying resonated with me. David Goggins has that famous quote where he said, "Imagine you get to the gates of heaven, and they put on a big screen, and it shows your entire life and all your accomplishments, everything you did, all the people you impacted, and then they turn it off and they go, 'This is what you could have had if you would have just taken that chance.'" Like,
Yeah.
and I think that quote's always stuck with me. Is that I completely agree, and that's been one of my big fears too in life. Is that, like, one day you're going to get to the end of the road, you're going to have but mere moments in life, and you're going to reflect on everything, and what are you truthfully in that moment going to reflect back on,
Yeah.
and that's, but that's reality, and I think that it's very easy to ignore that. I think it's very easy to just put that in the back of your mind, not pay any attention to it, and just go through the motions of life, and just be like, oh, well, eventually it'll get better, or oh, eventually I'll get to that, next step in my journey that I want to get to, rather than addressing it in full and saying, hey, you know what, I'm not where I want to be, but this is what I want, and now let's break it down. How do I get there? What are the steps I need to take to accomplish that goal? So
Yeah.
I completely agree.
I think you know what it is, and I don't want to say. Okay, I always tell my buddy Christian this too. In every situation, no matter what you're talking about, there's always outliers, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can't group every single situation, every single person into one thing. But I'll say this: I think a big reason people don't, even try to fulfill, what they want for life. Like I said, some people don't know what they want, and that's okay. You can take some time to figure that out. You should take some time to figure that out. But a lot of it is people are, and I'm guilty of this too. People are letting fear dictate how they live. Whether it be the fear of failure, the fear of humiliation, the fear of anything really.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but they think, well, I can't get hurt or I can't be disappointed in myself if I don't try, because then I don't build any expectations, right? But if you don't try anything, nothing's going to change. And some people are content with that. Some people are content with, doing their 9 to 5, going home, and there's nothing wrong with a 9 to 5, but doing your 9 to 5, going home, turning on Netflix for 3 hours, eating fast food, going to bed, and doing that for literally 70 years straight. And then you're going to get to your deathbed and be like, what did I do with my life? And you literally
Yeah.
do the same day over and over and over for 70 years.
Yep. It's scary, man. And, I don't want to generalize the Midwest, but from my personal experience, one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to move to the West Coast so bad growing up my entire life and finally did was that I just felt a lot of that you just explained, the complacency, the 9 to 5 grind and everything that is involved with it. And I'm sure there's all kinds of places like that maybe around the world or even the United States, but it just seems that and it's not a bad thing to be content with what you have, but it's the complacency of just not taking the next step, the fear is just failing and just being like, you know what, I don't want to do that, and just it's scary. It scared the shit out of me growing up. Is like, am I gonna be like that? Am I gonna wake up one day and be 69 and then be like, well, fuck, I haven't left, I haven't done any, like, nothing. So that was definitely a driving force for me. Obviously, you being down in Texas, that's a big jump from us growing up in the Midwest too.
That's
And
exactly what I
so
did.
and I think you had the same mindset as me, is that we only get to live once, so why not take the leap? And I tell this to every single young person out there, whether you're in college or out of college or whatever the case may be. Once, just one time, take the leap. Wherever you've thought in your head, hey, I would love to live there. Maybe it's New Hampshire, maybe it's Florida, maybe it's Tennessee, wherever it is. Fuck it. You're young, you're youthful. Just go, just do it. And the worst case scenario, maybe it goes for 6 months and you absolutely hate it. Then come back. Then then you can tell yourself, hey, I did that, and this is the outcome, so that's okay.
And to us, that seems pretty straightforward. It's like that's a
Yeah.
no-brainer, right? But to a lot of people, it's scary. And here's the thing too, like with that. So like, yeah, for a little background, I graduated college in 2020 when COVID broke out, and I was gonna move immediately to the West Coast actually.
Mm.
Um, and then I had some jobs lined up, and then COVID broke out, and the recruiter reaches back out to me and goes, "Yeah, well, we're gonna put holding on freeze, but you might be able to get a job out here, somewhere else." And I go, "Man, I'm not moving halfway across the country on a fucking maybe." So
Right.
moved back to Iowa for a year and a half, and honestly, I enjoyed my job there. It was fine. I was saving money. That was great. But it got to the point where, like I said, I'd been working there for 18 months, and I was due for a promotion 6 months later. Well, me knowing myself, I would have gotten that promotion, and then I would have, stayed there another 5 years, gotten another one, and the next thing I know, I'm 40 years old, and I never left Spencer. And like I
Yep.
said, there are far worse towns worse than Spencer. Don't get me wrong, Spencer. I'm glad I grew up there. Nothing wrong with the place, but I've experienced everything there is to experience there. I know everyone there is to know there. Like it's just for me, as far as the development of an individual human being, I think it really comes down to nature versus nurture. And there's aspects of both of those that feed into who you are and build into who you are. But the the nurture thing you're really not going to understand until you put yourself in some new experiences. And like I completely agree with you. Whether it be now, maybe you don't have to make as drastic of a move as we made. You moved 22 hours away, I moved 13 hours away. Maybe you don't have to do that, but like
Yeah.
just go somewhere out of your hometown while you're still young, while you have no one depending on you. It's just you. You don't have a family to provide for, nothing like that. You leave, experience something new. You're gonna grow a lot more as a person than you even expect. You're gonna I say discover yourself. That sounds super cliche, but like you're really gonna form into who you're meant to be, and figure out what you like about yourself, what you don't. Hopefully, attack those things that you don't like. That's the route that I took, but we'll get into that later. Transform yourself who you're supposed to be, and then if the time comes that you want to go back, then go back. But that's the thing is like
Yep.
it's a place. It's not going anywhere. It might change, but like
Hmm.
ultimately, it's not going anywhere. You always have the option to go back. Especially people in the Midwest is like usually it's cheaper to live there, so like going back isn't going to be like impossible. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's different if like I have a coworker that grew up in California and lives in Idaho now. Now, if you want to go back to California, that'd be a little bit harder.
Yeah. I agree.
But yeah, I think that's I think you and I definitely align in that mindset of it's because we've lived through it. But at some point in your life, if you're somewhere for 20 years, you're gonna have experienced everything there is to experience for you in that place. At least at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. And I mean, it can be a double-edged sword, because from my personal experience, I mean, it's just my personality. I don't know if I'm ever going to find a place where it's just like, that's it, and I'm going to be there forever. You know what I'm saying? Like, even being in Kansas City now, where we're like, raising kids and all that fun stuff, we're like, well, where's the next place? It's like, maybe there's the next place, the next place. We just don't know. And maybe that's just a personality thing, so I can't speak to it and say that every single individual needs to do that. But from my personal experience, what I would say, yes, is that it was a vital thing, and I think my wife can attest to it. I didn't become the person I was meant to be until I made that jump and truthfully landed on my feet and just tried a ton of things, failed a lot. I think that's one of the biggest things too, is that failure is not the worst thing in the world. Failure does not mean that everything is ended and that you can no longer go on this journey. Failure just means that you have failed at a certain activity that you tried. Try the next one. That didn't work, cool, go to the next one, you know.
Yeah.
And even if you reach to the very pinnacle of that and then it fails, try it again, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I always tell this story with people, is with the furniture business, where I started as a salesperson. I had never had a sales job in my life. They hired me on. I literally started at general sales. Within 9 months, I had my own store. I was running my own store. Within 2 years, I was the number one store for growth progressive margin in the country for Ashley, right? And then they sold the company and I got fired, more or less.
Yeah.
And so it's like they didn't want to bring me on to corporate. They said, enough, you're going to franchise, right? But then fuck that. I'm not going to be done with that. I'm going to go to another furniture store, you know, and just keep going. Like, it doesn't mean that just because you've had so much success and you fail that you got to give up, or that, you know, truly follow your passions and what you believe is the right thing to do, and it'll take you places in life, you know. And
Oh, yeah, for sure.
it's given me this sales career, and I have a ton more sales knowledge in the path, you know. Darian always makes the joke. She's like, from day one, I could tell you were a sales guy. And I was like, psh, I never thought of myself as a sales guy forever. And then until I was in it, and I'm like, holy shit, I'm good at this. I am a sales guy, you know?
Yeah.
But I have that car salesman where he's just going to breathe on your windshield and be like, so you're going to buy today? You're going to buy it? You know? But that's not it. That's not it at all. So, but anything I can say, yeah, just keep going, keep trying, doing it in all those things, find out who you truthfully are, and put yourself in those positions to take the leap, take the
Yeah.
chance, because you'll never get those if you just sit there and just wait complacently for life to come take it on itself. You have to
Oh,
go
for sure.
take it. So,
Yeah. Well, and yeah, honestly, I'll touch on that a little bit too from self-experience I can touch on. And you know, honestly, with these questions, you know me anyways. Obviously, your audience doesn't know me as well as you do, but like, I'm gonna get as personal as I want to get. I don't care what, like, I'm gonna tell people about me, and I'm, you know, like you said, I'm pretty humble, but I'm proud of who I am. You know, it took a
yeah.
lot to where I am. But yeah, with the approaching things, you know, like I said, from personal experience, I've done it both ways. You know, those opportunities are always going to come up. Obviously, you're never expecting them because no one can see into the future, but they're always going to come up, good and bad. You know, whether it be losing a job or, you know, getting an opportunity to go somewhere else or meeting new people or whatever it may be, good or bad. Those experiences are always going to be there. But I really want to emphasize the importance of carrying the correct mindset towards those. Because, like I said, regardless through life, you're gonna have stuff happen to you, good and bad. But you're gonna live through those experiences. But I can't stress how important it is, or how important or how drastic the difference is going through those experiences and those opportunities with a positive, optimistic mindset versus a negative, you know, mindset towards those. Because, like I said, I lived through both. I had a portion of my life where, you know, there was like 3 years of my life there where I just was, honestly, I didn't even view it as living. I viewed it more as surviving. You know, I was doing the same thing every day, you know, no joy in my life. I wasn't necessarily sad or mad at anything. It was just every day was the same, and it was just boring. And you know, that after a while, you know, your brain doesn't get stimulation. You just start thinking negatively, and nothing's new, and it's just, you know, you go through life that way. And you know, I went through some good and some bad experiences during that, but even the good experiences, you know, the metaphorical light was dimmed a little bit because of my negative mindset towards those things. Whereas in the opposite, and now, you know, the last probably 2 years of my life, and before that too, you know, I have a much more optimistic mindset. I'm, you know, in a better mood most of the days. And you know, you can't control everything in your life, and you know, you'll kill yourself if you try to.
Yeah.
But just having a better mindset, more optimistic, and you know, it's not necessarily easy, but like really truly believing that everything is, you know, whether everything truly is a blessing or a lesson, it's going to work out how it's supposed to work out. You know, maybe that's not exactly how you want it to, but at the end of the day, it's going to work out. You have to have full trust and belief in that and faith in that. But yeah, I really can't stress enough how important the difference in mindsets can have as far as an impact on the different experiences and situations you go through in life.
Yeah, I agree. And I've seen you go through those, and I can definitely, and you've seen me at my worst and come out at my best. So, like we said before, I've always appreciated you that, and so to see it firsthand and know, and hopefully people have someone like in their life like that in their life where they can truly see, maybe a friend, a family member, somebody that they know well, go through those trials and tribulations and say, hey, they did it, I can do it too. So,
Yeah.
um, but kind of leading into my next question, and I think I know the answer, but I would love to see how we compare with this. What emotion do you find the hardest to understand about yourself?
So I like to think of myself as pretty emotionally intelligent. Um, I think I've never gone to therapy, but I really think therapy is beneficial for a ton of people. To me, and maybe this is egotistical to think, but to me, I've thought about everything that I think about anyways. Like to me, if I go to a therapist, I think all they're gonna do is tell me what I already know about myself. You know what I mean? And maybe
Yeah,
that's egotistical to say, um, but I say that because when I start talking about hardest to understand about myself, I feel like I understand myself pretty well as far as why I react the way that I do, why I think the way I do. I overthink a ton of things, and you're never going to overthink yourself into, a happy ending. That's not how it works.
right.
Um, and the more you know about yourself, it's easier to say, I know why I feel this way, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's easier to cope with it. You know what I mean? Or easier to deal with it or build off of it. But to answer your question, what emotion do I find hardest to understand about myself? And I think this is an emotion that, you know, touching back on earlier, we were talking about letting fear, control your life and all your decisions derive from fear. I think the emotion that I find the hardest to understand with, and I think, or understand about myself and deal with, is one that most people, especially in our age, is the feeling of humility, shame, and just honestly, just sometimes I don't know necessarily how you would call this a feeling or what word you use to describe this as a feeling, but ultimately just never feeling like enough, if that makes sense.
Yep, self-doubt and
Yeah, for
insecurities.
sure. Yeah. But I
Yep.
think, I think everyone goes through that to a degree, but I think specifically the demographic of, fresh out of school, if you don't have your quote unquote life figured out, and that's okay, 20s, younger 30s, I think that's pretty common for most people. That's the one that they struggle with the most.
Yeah. I've always thought, I always tell people, like I said before, you're 6'5", blonde guy in great shape, but you might be one of the most insecure guys I know about your body and yourself. And it's
Yep.
just like, I'm an arrogant guy. I flex my shit and I talk my talk. So I'm like, man, if I was in that guy's position, I'd be fucking all over the place. But that's the emotions that people feel. They
Oh
just,
yeah,
and it's just something that you have to kind of go about and understanding about yourself, and that takes a lot of time. So,
for
but
sure.
I think with you, it's just you've acknowledged those things, and I think with even like your social media now, where you're doing the gym, and you found a lot of dedicated a lot of time to making your body better, and I think it's made your mind a lot better. I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
through doing that, you've kind of helped silence the demons in your head, and silence that self doubt because now you can look in that mirror and say, yeah, motherfucker, that's right. That's what I look like now, that's who I am. And that's how you've always felt inside, but you just didn't know how to get there or, it didn't always see that in yourself.
Oh, for sure. I think, honestly, and I'll be honest with you too. The physical benefits of getting in the best shape of my life were great, but it pales in comparison to the mental impact it's had. I think I always knew, and I want to say this in a way where I might not word it the best, and it's gonna come off egotistical. I'm the furthest thing from egotistical, but it might come off that way. I think I've always known like how much value I do provide as a person, but subconsciously I always think I can get better, and that's fine to want to get better. That's a sign of being not complacent, which is great. But it gets to a point where if you can't. There's a difference between wanting to get better and wanting to be perfect because perfect doesn't exist.
Right.
So I think for the longest time, I knew the value I provided as a person, in whatever scale you want to do, whatever facet you want to talk about, whatever category you want to bring up. Um, but it was more about proving that to myself and really being like, okay, no, I really am this person. I really do provide this value, and I can stand on that and be confident. And this is, excuse me, this is fully who I am, and ultimately, I think the biggest thing is, like I said, in my life, the biggest thing that matters to me is my relationships with people. Like I said, whether it be significant other, friends, family, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Um, but I got to the point where, and this took me way too long in life to get to the point, um, but I got to the point where I'm comfortable enough in myself and confident enough in who I am as a human being that honestly I really don't give a fuck if you don't like realistically, and again I'm no better than any other human, but realistically, obviously you know me, we've been friends for 15 plus years. Realistically, like if I don't get along with you, you're probably not the best human being. There's very few people I don't get along with, very few people I can't, communicate with. And I've reached that point in my life where I'm fully confident and comfortable in who I am as a human being. It doesn't mean I think I'm better than anyone else. Doesn't mean that I hold myself, higher than anyone. I'm my own biggest critic, which is okay.
Mm,
But I'm at the point in life where I'm fully confident and want to move forward with who I am. And if that rubs people the wrong way, that's one thing. But
yeah.
that was never my intention. It's just it took me way too long to fully accept the value I hold as a human being.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think when you get to that point, it's not arrogance and it's not cockiness. It's self-confidence, you know?
Mhm.
And to your point, who gives a fuck what other people say? If you can
Yeah.
truly look at yourself in the mirror and smile or be proud of who you've become, then who gives a shit what anyone else has to say?
Yeah.
But I think the second part of that question is like, how do you cope with that emotion? Would you say that the gym has truly been your therapy and given you the ability to be the person that you are now?
So I think there are a few different outlets I have in my life. Um, I would say what's transformed me the most in the past, I don't know, probably we're in 2026 now, probably the last 5.5, 6 years. There are a few things. Getting in shape was great. I'd been into lifting for, I don't know, the better part of the last 10 years, but I didn't really like, it was always one of those things where like, okay, I was motivated for 3 months and then I fell off for like 2 weeks
Mm,
or
yep.
motivated, but you know what I mean? I didn't really dial in until it was last year. And dude, I lost like 70 pounds in like 10 months.
Yep.
And I wasn't ever like, I wasn't in shape, but I wasn't like obese. You know what I mean? Granted, at my
Hmm.
height, you have to weigh quite a bit to be obese. But anyways, now I really dialed in coping that way because I think I talk to my roommate about this all the time. I really think for the gym, I understand why people don't get into it because if you're not fully into it, it does suck. Like no one wants to go, and it takes time. It's not easy per se, but um, it truly is one of the only things in life that you truly do get out whatever you put in. Like if
Yep.
you're fully focused on working out, you're fully focused on nutrition. You don't have to be perfect by any means, um, but it's one of those things where most of the variables are controlled by you, and you don't get that opportunity with many things in life, especially healthy outlets. So I would say, yeah, coping with those emotions and self doubt, is definitely one. Um, it wasn't necessarily like just fully for me. I didn't fully focus on why do I feel this way? Why do I feel these emotions? For me, it was more about how can I build myself up to feel new emotions that overtake these ones. So, like I said,
Mm,
with the gym thing, getting in better shape, feeling better about myself, that's helped. I think the other two things are um, my relationship with Christ. I grew up in and I saw this as one of your questions down the road too, so I won't touch on it too much now. But I grew up in a family that went to church every Sunday for the most part.
hmm.
But I did not find Christ in the church by any means. I've developed my relationship in, with God and religion when I was at my lowest points in life, and that was just me myself, and I have a few
Yeah.
friends that I talk to about that. But I think between the gym, between having faith in that relationship with Christ, and then the biggest one for me is I have as far as like self-image, and I don't mean that just physically. I mean just as a human being in general and the value I provide. I maybe have had too much self-doubt my entire life, but at the same time, for whatever reason, I've always been an optimist about me achieving my ultimate end all be all goal in this life of what we talked about earlier, being the best husband, the best father possible. So my third outlet was it wasn't necessarily one specific thing, but I literally looked at myself in the mirror and went, okay, what are some things I can do now to prepare myself for that?
Yep.
Because you have no idea what's coming in life. You have no idea how long your time on this earth is. But in the meantime, you know, it's January 20th at the time of this recording. Whether we like it or not, a week from now it's going to be January 27th. The time's going to pass no matter what. So what are you going to do in the meantime to build yourself into who you want to be and what you want to achieve in life? So what I did, in that sense was, obviously get in the best shape of my life. Started, building some businesses, started, some side jobs, just a bunch of things that would ultimately, feed into bettering myself. And now, did all those things work out perfect? Absolutely not. But like you said earlier, failure is part of it. And if you're afraid to fail, you're never going to make any progress, anyways. So, you could try 17 things that all fail before your next one works, or you could not try anything and then you guarantee nothing ever working. So I would say, yeah, as far as coping, it was, bettering myself mentally, physically, spiritually, and then ultimately just working towards, that goal I do have myself. And, God willing, I get to that goal. But like I said, at the end of the day, no one really knows how long they're going to be alive. And,
Yeah,
that's how it is. But you control what you can control, and you go from there.
I agree. So, what do you think is the most painful truth that you've had to accept about yourself through finding yourself and trying to be the best version of yourself?
I think it's painful truth. I think admitting to myself that I was maybe weak's not the right word, but weaker mentally than I allowed myself to acknowledge. I thought I had, just because I'm self-aware about things doesn't mean that I am honest with myself about things. I have some struggles that, and I mean, they pale in comparison to anyone else's, but there's that too. I've told my buddy that before. It's like, well, other people have it way worse than me. It's like, but you can't live life like that. Because
Yeah,
someone's always going to have it worse, someone's always going to have it better, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, there are billions of lives going on that, are just as complex as the next. So I think for me, the thing that was the hardest was, fully opening up and admitting to myself like the issues that I had. And like I said, there were other things. It was nothing drastic by any means, but there were things that were affecting me. And if I didn't acknowledge them and face them head on, I would never change as a human being and evolve to who I am now.
yeah. Um, No, I love that answer because I think I had a very similar situation with my back is that, there was some underlying things that I knew about myself, but I just never acknowledged them. It's that dark cloud when you look at yourself in the mirror. You're like, it's there, it's exists, but you just don't want to look at it. You
Yep.
just like, it's just that smudge in the mirror. It's fine. I'll just keep trugging through. And I like what you said. I've said the same thing. And when I was in Africa, I saw the reality of life in a lot of situations. People are literally walking back with their food on their head, their water jugs in their arms, and they're going back to their clay hut for the night. And it's
Yeah.
like, what the hell do I have to worry about when I come home to my
Yeah.
beautiful house, my dogs, my kids, my wife, and my
Yep.
everything that we have in life? And it's like, am I really gonna sit here and pout all day because I'm upset about something? I get up and change it, or like something about myself. And I think for me personally, I don't know if you've tried this at all, but I am a big writer or talker in the sense of if
Yeah.
I really struggle with an emotion or something that I just can't get out of my brain with myself, talking or just straight up typing and writing it out has helped me immensely. And I think that truthfully has helped me recognize some things about myself and actually talk to yourself, the self talk, and actually acknowledge some things that are painful. I mean, there's a lot of painful truths about life, but I don't think there's anything quite as painful of waking up one day and life not being what you thought it was. You gave yourself this whole image or delusion that life was this way, and you wouldn't let yourself take accountability. And then that day comes where you get that slap in the face, and you're like, "Fuck, I could have just dealt with this years ago, but here we are. This is life now." So, life's a bitch, and then you die. Am I right? So,
Yeah. Well, I think too, and we've been privileged to have the friend group that we have.
hmm
And I've built some friendships, other than you guys since, we had those in high school. But I tell people to honestly, between friends, family, all of it, probably if I were to write down a list, the 20 most important people to me in my life, honestly 12 of them are probably just friends. And
yeah,
that's because they one, they're the same age as you, so they go through the same phases of life to a degree at the same time. But two, when you're experiencing some of the same things and you've built a bond, 10, 12, 15 years, you know the person like the back of your hand. Now, some people
yeah,
open up more than others. I'm a pretty open person, especially emotionally, especially for a guy, I feel like. But I have no problem being that. I know that's who I am, and I embrace that. But I think, it's easier said than done. But I really think if you can get wise counsel or get good counsel that's actually good for you. Like I said, we were privileged enough to have, the friend group we've had since, middle school basically. But if you can
Yeah.
get even one, two people in your life that, truly want you to be better for you, whether that be, career oriented, family oriented, whatever it may be. Um, but, talking to yourself is great. It makes you, acknowledge things that you just think about. Writing is great as an outlet, but I truly think the most rewarding and most beneficial and satisfying outlet you can have is talking to somebody. And I don't, and for some people it's a therapist, for some people it's a friend, for some people it's a parent, for some people it's a significant other, whoever that may be, but
Mm.
just voicing it. Because a lot of the times, like I said, I'm in my head a lot. But a lot of the times I can think about something and I will ruminate about it and I will only just think about it. I can't think about anything else until it's gone. And the only way I can get out of my head is to put it into words and verbalize it. But the second I do that, I either figure it out or what was causing the issue, or I realize that it that wasn't that big of an issue at all, but I need to just get it out of my head per se. So I
I
think,
think.
someone that you can just communicate with, whether it be one, two, five people, whatever, it
Mhm.
makes it way easier to deal with those emotions.
The concept of being heard and truthfully someone just listening and understanding what you're saying is undervalued. I think
Oh,
you're right on
absolutely.
the money. Is that it just so many times we want to I can figure this out myself. I can break this down. It's my problem. No one wants to hear my problems. No one wants to hear my issues, and I think a lot of time as men too, it's like that the term being a pussy, right? Where you're just like, oh man, I can't talk about this. I just gotta man the fuck up. Like stop being such a bitch about this. But the reality is that when you finally get heard by someone other than your own voice talking to yourself, it a huge weight off your chest. And I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that have not gotten that opportunity, or they have some deep dark demons in their head that they just haven't had the confidence or the ability to talk to somebody else about it. So, and I think that's a base premise of the show is that just if you can take away anything, know that there's people out there that are willing to listen. Know that there's people out there that are willing to go through the battles that you're going through, and you don't have to do it alone. No matter what you're going through in life, the highs, the lows, the in betweens, find somebody that you can build confidence in, or somebody that you trust, and just talk. Just let
Yeah.
it out. Just let it out, whatever way you need to do. But yeah,
I think, I
go
was gonna
ahead.
say, I think everyone's got to do what they got to do for themselves too. But I think too, you had said a lot of people don't reach out because they're just, scared or whatever, and that that's valid. Fear is a very paralyzing emotion. But I think that being said, the people that are okay with, or I shouldn't say okay, but thrive talking about these type of things, like you said, especially as men, I think you need to um, be more outgoing about it, and build not necessarily build a platform, but like show people that it is okay. Like for example, like the being a pussy thing. No one's gonna look at me and call me a pussy. You know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive and emotional, especially as a guy. But I'm okay being that. But like I said, it's easier for me because, like I said, no one's gonna look at me and call me pussy. Like that just doesn't happen. But I think for the people that are okay with verbalizing their emotions and are good at it, I've been told by some of my closest friends that's something that I do best is verbalizing emotions.
Yeah.
But I think the people that are good at that, should expand that more. And the more you open up and the more you, and I'm not saying tell everyone your life story by any means, but the more you open up and show people that it is, especially as men, that it is okay to verbalize your, emotions and talk to the people about that. I think it, opens it up and kind of encourages the other people to be brave in a sense, take that courageous leap, and because at the end of the day, I really don't think verbalizing how you feel or talking to someone about it is ever going to be, negative for you or hurt you in any means, unless you open up to the wrong person and they, twist those words back at you, which can
Yeah.
definitely happen. But I think as a whole, just getting out of your own head is super important nowadays.
I agree, 100%. Well, I guess to kind of twist towards a more broader aspect of society and such,
Yeah.
with the question. So I've wrapped my brain around this a lot. So I love to know what you think. With what do you think modern society takes most for granted with our human existence?
Um, I think modern society takes most for granted. You mean like society, like collectively, all as humans as a whole?
Yes.
I think time.
Mm.
I think from the moment you are out of middle school, you're being what's the word I want to? You're being trained, or I'm going to say trained. There's probably a better word for it, but you're being trained to, okay, well, this is how high school's going to work. So you need to do this, 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 act this way. And then from the moment you're in high school, they're doing that to, okay, this is what college is going to be, or this is what the workforce is going to be. And then you get into that, and reality is you could be 25 years old, 28 years old, whatever. Obviously, you've grown as a person and gone through experiences, but like as far as like structured living, you're the same 16-year-old that 17-year-old that graduated high school. Like once you get into the real world, there is no structure other than the structure you create yourself. And some people thrive off that. Some people can do that. They can go to the real world and say, I need to do this, this, this today. I need to do this to accomplish my goals. Great. And some people, get there and they're like, I don't know what to do. I've been told what to do my entire life, and now what do I do?
Mm.
And the reality is like, I say time because, like I said, no one really knows how long they have on this earth. But I would say the average age is, and I could be way off here, but it's probably low 70s, right? Let's just say it's 75.
Yeah.
So let's say you have 75 years to live. You get out of. Let's say you do go to college. Not everyone does. But let's say you get out of college and you're 21, 22 years old. So that gives you another what, 45, 48 years. Um, you're just, and social media definitely doesn't help, but it's just constantly, that's the thing. Social media is just a flood of everyone's highlights. You don't actually see what they go through on a day-to-day basis. You don't,
Yeah.
but you get out and it's just human nature to just start comparing yourselves to everything else that you see, right? You've got 16-year-old streamers making millions of dollars a month. It's like, that's not realistic. But at the same time, too, what you described earlier on the call, talking about people in Africa, it's like, that's the life they're going through. Like, it's completely opposite ends of the spectrum, right? And
Hmm.
it's okay to live in the middle. Most people are going to live in the middle. I think the biggest thing, though, is, like I said, time. You don't know how long you're going to be here, but at the same time, too, it's a really tough balance because you can't waste time. You need to go, make an effort towards, what you want out of your future. But at the same time, you can't be solely focused on building your future so much. And I'm guilty of this, to be honest. So solely focused on your future that you don't have enough time to enjoy the present, or you don't have enough of yourself to enjoy the present. Because I could do all the building I want for my future family, and let's say, God forbid it happens, but let's say I get really sick one day, and was that for nothing? No, but I didn't get to enjoy my experiences to the fullest in the present that I could have. So
I
I think
agree.
people take time for granted, and like I said, to me, anyways, nothing's more important than my relationships with people. So whether it be your time for building yourself, or your life that you're gonna live, or even your time with specific people, because once they're gone, they're gone. You know what I mean? So whether that be for a lot of people that's grandparents, but that's not limited to just that. So I think people really think they have to have everything figured out, and that's not true, because if you do that, you're just going to overthink yourself into a hole, and you're not going to achieve anything. But at the same time, too, you can't waste time, because at the end of the day, it is basically, it's the only finite thing that you have in your life is time.
Yeah. I find myself at both ends of the spectrums, right? Where I think if you look at life as a whole, what society has always told you is that your first part of your life is being a kid, right? Going to school, going to college, all that fun stuff. Step number two is you get a significant other and you start a family, right? Step three is that you become an empty nester and then maybe you become a grandparent. And then finally, step four is you die, right? And I think that it is so easy to get wrapped up in that time frame, in that time restriction, that people are just like, oh my goodness, I'm not to phase two yet, and I'm 20, 28 or 30, and I'm now I'm 35 and I still don't have a wife or kid. I'm falling out of these brackets of time. I just think that it's not necessary. I don't think there should be time restraints on your life. I don't think there should be brackets that you put yourself in. Let them happen. I tell this story all the time. When I was in basic, I'm sure I wrote to you and everybody else. Oh, I was coming home to marry Darian that day. That
Yeah.
first step, I was coming home and I was doing it. And I was 20 years old. And me and Darian talk about it all the time. That would have been the biggest mistake of my life, because there were so many things that I had to do personally, and so many things that she had to personally do as well to find out about ourselves, that it would have ruined us. And if we would have gotten married, we would have had so many more trials and tribulations that we wouldn't have been able to overcome ourselves and find out who we are. But because I was in that mold, and it was just like, well, you got to get married now, because if you're in the military, this, that, and the other thing, blah, 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 you got to start your family, get this, get that. And so I tell people that would have been the biggest mistake of my life. And obviously we're married now, but we took the appropriate amount of time and went through the right amount of life experience to then finally get to the point where we're like, yep, now it's time. Now it's time to get married. This is the right thing to do.
I think a lot of what it is, like I said, growing up, all the way from preschool to, high school, everything's structured for you. Everyone goes through the same things to a degree, right?
Yeah.
And then you get out of that, whether you go to college or not, you get out of that and you have all this freedom. And, it's new. And that can be exciting. It can also be scary. But I think what people try to do is they try to build structure off the freedom, because that's all they've known their entire life is structure. So, like, example, like you said, the structure most people go by is, get a job, have a family, work that for, 30 years, retire, or 40, or however long, retire, become grandparents, maybe, and then that's it. And, that's fine if that's what you want as your goal. Like I said, my goal is pretty simple in the standard of, it's common, right?
Yeah.
But that's all I've ever wanted. And that's who I am. But I think people try to put structure on something that doesn't necessarily need it. And then when you do structure, you build these benchmarks, and it's great to have goals. It's phenomenal to have goals and work towards them. But you can't, like, for example, like, let's say you wanted to be married with kids by 30, right? You can be single at 29 and be like, okay, well, I'm not gonna achieve this. That's okay though. You know what I mean? Like, you put those restraints on yourself. You put that structure on yourself. You're allowed to change them. You know what I mean? And let's say, for example, someone wants to be married, and let's stick with that same example. Someone wants to be married with kids at 30. They say that at 22. They get to 29. Maybe they don't want to get married anymore. Maybe they don't want kids anymore. It's okay to change your mind on things. Now, it's different once you make commitments and other things, but that's a whole other thing. But, like, it's okay to not have structure in your life as long as you're moving metaphorically forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think you touched on a great point there. Is, yeah, it's just, don't get caught up in not fitting the mold. Don't worry about it. It'll come. And I think, to your other point too, is acknowledging the lack of time there is. And I don't think I've truly appreciated time until I had Freya. And even now she's going to be 20 months here, and it's like, where's the last 20 months gone? And the reality is, with our society, is that when they turn 18 and graduate high school, it's off to the hills. Like with us, I went to college, then moved across the country, and I'm sure, looking back now with my parents, I'm like, man, I put a lot of stress and a lot of, probably anger in their minds and hearts, because they spent all that time, and they wanted me to be around and to share the next part of life. And obviously that was a huge part of why I moved back to the Midwest, was because that I almost felt like I shorted them that. They spent 18 years trying to mold this this man and become a good person, and then the next thing you know, I just ran away. And that is part of life. But I think that, yeah, it's just like, truly there are things in life that make you slow down and truly recognize what you have, and to not take it for granted. Because, I mean, yeah, the next thing you know, I'm going to be at her graduation wishing her away to what the next thing she wants to do in life, and I'll never get that time back again. And that's the saddest part about life, but that's the greatest joys, is that if it was eternal, then it wouldn't be worth it, right? Exactly. You gotta go through life, and it's the short things that matter the most. So and touching back on society, I mean, I think you're right on with the time. I completely agree. My biggest thing that I've always said is that people just don't understand reality. The reality is, as a human being, there's about 3 things that you have to do in life. You have to sleep, you have to eat, and you have to piss and shit, right? Like, if we truly want to break it down, what it means to live and be alive with a heartbeat, that's what it is. But we want to overcomplicate it to the max. Oh my God, Jimmy didn't like my social media post today, so I'm going to just go sit in my room for 5 hours and blast my day away because I'm sad about it. Or, oh my goodness, I don't have $8 billion in the bank account like this cool guy on social media does, so I guess I'm going to go piss away my friends and family and go try and chase down a dream that isn't mine, So I think when you truly just break it down, and I know it's way more complicated than that, but the reality is, as a human being, and you see it when you have a fucking kid, what really makes you have a heartbeat is you got to feed them, you got to let them sleep, and you got to change their shit. Like, that's it. That's all you have to do to be existent and be a human being in life. But for some reason, somehow we twist it so bad. We twist it to these things where like I don't have the newest iPhone. I'm just a failure in life. I don't know what I'm
And
doing
it's
with my life, and just all these stupid
and
things.
it's funny just because and it's because okay, everything your mindset and everything is shaped by what what you've lived through.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's so funny because like for example, that example you just gave with the newest iPhone, I could give two fucks if I had the newest phone on the market. As long as my
Mm-hmm.
phone, I can call people and message people. That's all I fucking need. But there's some people, the second the new phone comes out, they have to have it. It's like for what? For what reason though? You know what I mean? Like why do you value that so much?
Yeah,
People value different
and
things. That's fine, but like it'll never make sense to different people because you just value different things.
yeah, and I'm not saying I haven't failed societal standards. For the love of God, I bought my dream car when I was what 23,
Yeah.
and I got fired the next day. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was out there chasing, and don't get me wrong, every time I drove around in that thing, and I was
Imagine.
like making sure people were looking at me, you know, driving fast. Like, I was 100% trying to
Yeah.
fit in the societal figure and
Yeah.
get that look and get that attention. So, everyone's susceptible to it, but I think it's just, yeah, as long as you can truthfully see reality for what it is, that's all
Yeah.
that matters. You
I
can
think.
still have those things and be cool and
Yeah.
do all that shit,
I
but
think. I think the other thing too with the time thing, people waste the most time without even realizing without even realizing that they're doing it. And what they're doing is they're trying to live or create this life that isn't even what they want, but they want everyone to see that it looks like that's what they want. You know what I mean? Like this isn't even the life they're chasing at all, but it looks cool to other people, and they're literally creating a life for themselves to appease or to like prove something to other people. And that's where you have
mm-hmm.
the biggest waste of time.
Yeah. And that's why I deleted social media for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And it was just because, yeah, it was that constant regurgitation of people. You could just tell people weren't being themselves. Everyone was trying to be something else other
Mm-hmm.
than who they actually are. They're just trying to get these likes, these follows, this, that, the other thing, or whatever they were trying to do. And it was grossing me out. And so I just I had to step away from it for a while, and so now, and I think that was part of me just being myself and not wanting to hear it. But I think it's okay to step back. I think it's okay to not be jumbled up in the societal needs that everybody tries to place on you. I tell Darian all the time, money is a made up construct, right? We literally are at a point in society and in technology that I have to go to my electronical phone, type in a password in an app, and then it says a magical number. That's
Yeah.
how much my worth is, right?
Yep.
So, but we'll go to the grocery store and I'll take this plastic card and just tap it. Now I get all my groceries.
Yeah.
I'll go somewhere and like, oh, I like that. Let me just tap this plastic card over a number
No,
that's
no, you don't
literally
even
a
touch
made
the card on
up.
the phone. You don't even need the
It's
card anymore. Yeah.
Yes, and it's just
Yeah.
like that, but that's literally people are out there killing themselves for a number that's on a screen. Like money is all they
Well,
care
and
about. All these things.
that's what I said.
It's
Like
crazy.
earlier, what we touched on is like, I think it's an emotion of humility that people just aren't okay to like. And again, I've been guilty of this too. Nothing like in that regard, but like in the sense of like, you have to realize that no one is doing as good as they like are showing you. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
absolutely.
Especially at our age. Um, but you see other people like, and you share some of the same goals with some people because there's so many people in the world that you're bound to have the same goals as some people, right? And you see some people making it your goal, and that just eats you alive because that's not you, right? But the thing is like, depending on what your goal is, it can literally all change in the matter of one day. Like there can be one experience, meeting one person, doing one thing, being at the right place at the right time. One thing can completely transform your life. And I know that sounds super cheesy and cliche, but it actually is true.
Yeah, 100%. It's the things that are out there that you don't know are out there.
Yeah.
Like I said before, the sales thing. I never even knew sales wasn't a possibility. Next thing you know, that's my career. That's what
Yeah.
I'm going to spend the next God knows how many years trying to do. And I think people have that a lot of aha moments where they're like, oh shit, I never knew. And
Yeah.
until you live out, you don't know. So, well, believe it or not, those are just my intro questions. So, shall we jump into
Yeah, no, absolutely.
the
Let's
meat
get
and
to it.
potatoes? This is a super broad one, but I do think it's very important because I don't think very many people ever ask themselves this question.
Yeah.
In your own words, what does it mean to be a human?
I mean, there's a couple different avenues. There's a few different avenues you can take with that answer, or with that question, I should say. I mean, you laid out just 5 minutes ago the basics of what it takes to actually be a human being, right? Have a functioning brain. I mean, some people are literally just plugged into a machine and they have a functioning brain. You know what I mean? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
that question is about as broad as you get. The way I'm going to answer it, how I read it, and how I personally just what jumps out to me and how I think of it. Right? It might be
Mm-hmm.
completely different than someone else's, but I think that's the point of such a broad question. To me, being a human is purely, one, learning through different experiences, and living through those things. Like I said, whether you realize it or not, your brain is constantly making note of things, whether it be things to be afraid of, to make be aware of, to keep in mind, whatever it may be. Your brain's constantly processing information, right? So for me, what it is to be a human is to go through those experiences day in and day out, deciding if you want it to affect you to the point of changing who you are as a human being, or if you don't want it to, and then taking steps on figuring out one, who you are as a human; two, who you want to be as a human; three, what that looks like; and then four, ultimately taking steps on how you get there. So, if, like for me, for example, I have my goals that I have. I can't just magically snap my fingers and all those goals are going to happen right then and there. But if that were the case, what's the point of life? You know what I mean? If
Mm-hmm.
everyone could give you, if I could say, hey, I want this is everything I want in life, snap my fingers and I have it. Well, then what do I do once I have it? You know what I mean? It'd be great to enjoy those things for a little bit, but if you were just telling me, okay, this is your life next 70 years, yes, you got everything that you wanted, but you're living the same exact day in, day out for the next 70 years. You're gonna hate that. You know what I mean? So yeah, as far as being a human, to me, it's personalized to each individual person. I'm gonna answer it more specific than broad, but it's purely figuring out who you are, what you value, what you want to do in this life, and chasing that. Because at the end of the day, like we've touched on today already, time is your only finite anything in life.
Mm-hmm.
It might take you some time to figure out what you want, but that's part of life itself. Once you figure it out, you start working towards those things. Because at the end of the day, too, there are going to be obstacles, good and bad, that come up on your journey to fulfilling those aspirations that you have for yourself in life, and that's what life is as well. That's what being human is as well, is experiencing and going through those things. Because like I said, I firmly believe all life is the experiences that you have for yourself, whether you make them or they come to you.
Yeah, I agree. I think the word that stands out the most is journey. And I think that every single human has their own journey. And as we mentioned before, I think one of the biggest illusions in life is the thought that you have control over your own life, or that you have control over other people or other factors of life. So I think part of the journey is just waking up and taking on whatever life brings at you. I think that is a big part of being human, is that you have to adapt and you have to change and you have to become a different person, and just overall grow into the person that you're meant to become. And I think even people, if they're in their 60s, 70s, or so on and forth, they're still learning things about themselves. They're still growing. They're still, they're just on this journey. It's the journey of life, man. And I think that it is one of the biggest blessings that we could ever be bestowed, is that the reality is that we're on a floating space rock in the middle of the galaxy, and somehow, some way, which we'll get into these questions, but somehow we got here and we're living a
Yeah.
life. And so to be human is to go through that journey. So I think the worst thing that you could do is give up on the journey and just completely, give up on life, and take away from what it means to be human. And that's just taking on the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, and just taking it on the chin and keep moving forward. So
Yeah.
I love that word. I think that definitely sums it up to the T for me as well. So
Yeah.
um, well, let's move the conversation in. So I knew this is a big topic that I like to talk about with people, is religion and or creation. And I know it is extremely hard for people to talk about it. So one of my big things is always telling people, share what you want to, don't have to share everything, don't feel
Yeah.
that you need to. But I know that obviously, knowing you, that personally, that you're a religious guy, and I think that it's very important for people to be religious. So as much as you're willing to share, give out to me, I would love to hear about it, and then I would love to tell you my side of things as well. But we'll keep it broad for the most part to start. But when you think about the origins of humanity, what version of our beginning makes the most sense to you? Scientific, spiritual, or something in between, and why?
Okay. So yeah, I want to preface this with this. We're gonna keep this pretty broad. I'm gonna share what I'm gonna share. But when it comes to religion, that's a topic too that I think a lot of people avoid nowadays. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people avoid a lot more conversations in general just because they're afraid of getting canceled because society's just soft. But that's a whole other topic. But when it comes to religion, before I answer this, I do want to preface it too. Is like my biggest thing that I think, maybe not issue, but for lack of a better term, the biggest issue with the conversations revolving around religion nowadays, in my opinion, are the people having them. I think religion is something that people should definitely talk about. No one, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, their own thoughts, all that. But I know a ton of people that have been, and I'm sure that there have been instances where it's been a positive impact too. But I know a ton of people that have a negative mindset towards religion, solely based off of the conversations that they've had and who they've had the conversations with, rather than religion itself. So, like for example,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm sure there's other situations that have been the inverse of this, and I'm sure this exists with other religions too. I'm just not aware of it. But like I'm a Christian, for example, right? I know a ton of people that I wouldn't say reject Christianity, but I would say don't necessarily like correlate themselves with that or include themselves with the idea of Christianity solely because of quote unquote Christians had have our conversations for them and told them basically, you're going to hell for this, you're a bad human being for this. At the end of the day, we're all sinners, whether you believe in Christ or not. If you were to follow that, you know, if you were to follow the Bible, we all are sinners. Whether you are, like I said, whether you acknowledge it or not, that is what it is. But yeah, I just wanted to say that before we go into the topic of religion is everyone's entitled to their own opinion, their own thoughts. I for one, I know other people definitely judge. I for one don't at all. Without saying too much, as far as your views and my views are not the same at all, but I still view my best friend in life. So like that doesn't like just because we have different religious views doesn't make I can separate religion and the human being completely different. I know a lot of people can't, but I absolutely can, and I think that's important. Um,
Absolutely.
but that being said, with the origins of humanity, I do, correlate and I do astute to the creation of everything from God. Um, I think for me, I'm a huge overthinker in life about everything. Um, and religion aside, I'm a huge overthinker about everything. And to me, there's only a few ways my overthinking stops. Either one, I overthink myself into the worst case scenario, and it just, it ends there. Basically, I crash out, and that's just what it is. Like that's too harsh of a word and too intense of a word to use, but essentially, I just crash out, and that's just what happens. Or I overthink to the point of um, almost coercing my mind into an answer that makes sense to me, or convincing myself of an answer that would logically make sense. I'm a very logical thinker too. The other possibility is someone gives me some new information that gives me an answer, and I don't have to overthink about it anymore. There's only three. There's only three things that can happen. So back to that second one, though. To me, we're never gonna know. You're really not. To me, though, of what I've learned, like I said, I did go to church growing up, but I didn't really build or establish a relationship with Christ until I was, older, like lower 20s or younger 20s. Um, but as far as the creation of Earth, I do side with it being created by Christ. And here's the thing for me. I have a reason. I mean, I have my own reason, anyways. And I'm not trying to convince anyone else to do whatever. Like I said, I already prefaced about how I feel about religion and pushing it on others. I will never push it on others. But if people want to have a conversation about it, I'm open to that.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that know far more than me about this. Some of the people that we even know pretty well. So I'm no expert by any means. But here's the way I view it. One, I view it in the simplest terms. I would ask people. I go, okay, so let's say the creation, or let's say everything is created by God. God's real. Everything you've ever heard about God is real, right? So you live a good life. You devote your life to serving Christ. All these other criteria per se, all these other parameters. You make it to heaven when you die, right?
Mm-hmm.
You make it to hell, right? Like I said, I don't think it's that simple, but let's just say it is for the sake of this conversation. Why why would you to me why would you risk, like, let's say I would rather be wrong and believe in Christ and then when I die nothing happens than be right, not believe in Christ and go to hell. You know what I mean? I think that's the most, and that I know there's way more, you can go into way more depth than just that, but at point blank, like most simplest form, that's the argument that I give. And I don't give that for the creation of earth, I just give that to creation of, or I give that to the argument of, believing in Christ. The other thing that makes sense for me, and why it makes sense for me, is, well, we talked about it. There are billions of lives going on, each as complex as the last. People are passing away every day. New lives are being created every day, right? And between that and the way that the human body works, and let's just say not even humans, there's animals, there's, plants, all that stuff, right? The way that everything works and corresponds to each other and builds off of each other and lives off of each other, I just personally think that's way too complex of something to have just happened out of nowhere. You know what I mean? The Earth, like Earth in general. I mean, there's more than just Earth, but let's just say just Earth. All the life and the energy, because essentially all life is energy, right? All the life and energy that transpires throughout Earth each and every day, not even just Earth, but for the sake of this conversation, just Earth, it's so complex that the only thing that would make sense to me is a higher power creating everything that it's such a higher power that we will never fully understand how high that power is. And
Yeah.
that's the one, and that's like I said, I have other reasons too with my faith, but like putting my personal faith aside, trying to be as objective as possible, that's why I believe what I believe.
I think you hit it the nail on the head with that in the sense of that we will never know.
Mhm.
So I've always said I think it's incredibly ignorant for anyone to say you are wrong because you don't believe in my religion and you're going to wherever. Because we will never know, and I don't think anyone can argue that. And if you do, I think you're wrong. And so I take the 100% same stance as you is as long as you're a good person, who cares what you believe in, right? And I do think that being religious, whether you're Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, whatever it is, as long as you follow every religion has their own principles and
Mhm.
morals, and at the core of it they're trying to make you a better person. So I
Yep.
think if you follow those things and try and become a better person no matter which path you take, who cares, right? But why I ask is because, like you mentioned, we have different opposing views. Since I
Yep.
haven't been able to voice mine, I'm a Buddhist. I believe in Buddhism, and it's a very opposite tradition than any other religion because it's the only religion that doesn't have a God, right? I
Mhm.
don't believe that there's an almighty eternal being out there or anything that created anybody. So that's why this question, really sparks in my mind is because
Mhm.
I have my own version of how I think the world was created and how we get to our place and time here, but everybody else has their own. So
Sure.
back onto yours, being a Christian, so you follow the traditional view of like Adam and Eve and that they were the first
Yep.
humans and everything kind of evolved from there. Do
Yep.
you have like as a history man myself, I like to put things in timelines. Would you say there's
Yep.
like a timeline when all of this took place? Because obviously the first argument is that scientists say that the Earth's 4 billion years old, dinosaurs are 135 million years old.
Yeah.
Where did humans come into it, and how and why did it take so long for a god or whatever to put us here and create that story?
Yeah. So I don't necessarily have a straight answer, like a timeline that you're asking for, and this is why I preface too. Like there are people that know, even like, I mean, obviously you have the argument of Christianity, you have the argument of other religions, you have the argument of no religion. But even people within Christianity know way could argue or could answer this question way better than I could, right? I consider myself a Christian, but like I said, the depth of my Christianity is not solely, but primarily rooted in just my personal life and my relationship with Christ personally. So as far as this, I don't have a set answer for you, but what I will say is, um, I think I'll touch on the fact of, we have a sense of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But who's to say, okay, so let's say this higher power of God exists, right? He's such a higher power that we'll never fully understand what he is, right? And that being the case, if he's that high of a power, where he's not really a person, place, or a thing per se, how do we know that? Let's just say he's a he. Let's just for the sake of the argument put a title on him. Who are we to say that he has to live within the structure of time? Like, what if he's such a high power that he's above time? If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that that's an argument, but the thing is like like I said, we'll never fully know. And the other thing I talk about it too is this: if he's a higher power that is such a higher power that we'll never fully understand, even as human beings, the science. And here's one of my arguments against science per se, and it doesn't necessarily fully entangle with this question, but I'll say this: so like scientists have done all this research, um, found this, tested this hypothesis, all this, right?
Mm.
How do we know how much of our brain capacity we actually use as humans? Like there's a world out there, and we'll never know because we can't test it. But there's a world out there that we only use, like Let's say we use 80% of our brain capacity. Well, maybe that other 20% would allow us to see the higher power, but we'll never know.
Yeah.
But
Um,
that's not a great argument. I don't mean to say it as an argument, but like it's just something to get people thinking. You know what I mean? Like again, we're never really gonna know, and that's why I had to preface the religion thing with the way that I did because no one's ever right or wrong. You know what I mean? And even if you are, you don't know that. You can't stand and say you're wrong because of this. I'm 100% right because of this because you never know.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point is that in a lot of religious traditions use, whether it's an ancient tradition or a modern day tradition, use earthly herbs, drugs that we call them now. That's the term we use today. To see their gods because it's kind of that mindset too of like we truly don't know how to fully unlock our capability and as the most educated people on the planet have said that we don't use 100% of our brain all the time. We just don't. And so that's built and rooted into a lot of religions is that they take certain things to get to that point where they can see their gods or they can see more of who they are ancestrally wise.
Yeah,
And I think it's a good thing to be open to it about it.
yeah,
We like to use that in society as like a huge red flag of like, oh, you're a druggie. Oh, that's cool. Like, then you're just a piece of shit and you don't have any values. That's not the case at all. In a lot of religions and what used to be is that this is the closest way to get to your gods. This is the closest way to unlock that next chapter or next portal in your brain to get to a different and deeper meaning.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. Like, let's say for example, what you just said about having to use drugs to open up, that extra portion of your brain over. Let's say that's true. Like, you have to take drugs to, go through that metaphorical portal in your brain, right, to reach that, to see different things and think different things.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself just, you know, exaggerates what I was talking about with life being so complex and the human body, just the human body alone being so complex that has to be the case. Like, we're never going to fully know what the brain's capable of. We just aren't. And
No.
I just think, and that's my, like I said, argument's too harsh of a word, too intense of a word, but that's my argument of it being a higher power is I just think there's way too much going on. Life itself is all way too complex to just have happened by accident. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it's there's no right way to say it. And if you truly took like let's say you had a weekend, you had nothing to do and let's write it down on a pen and paper how we got to where we are and take it all the way back to the splitting of the atom that created this planet that we call Earth.
Yep.
How the hell did we get here? If this planet is 4 billion years old and now we've put a timeline on it and we're here where we are now, how the hell did we get here? And I don't know if there is a right answer to it. The other historical argument that I always make is that I'm more on the evolution side of things, where I do think that we are here by chance, and I do think that kind of builds into why I value life so much is that I think that I think that we're here by chance. I think that human evolution, science, and everything in between just kind of took its course, and we just so happen to be where we are today. And we want to piss it away. We want to, worry about the little things or not value our lives. And so to me, that's just preposterous because the mathematical statistic of how we could be here as human beings and having this conversation right now, let alone you being in Texas and me being in Kansas City and having this conversation is fucking mental. You could run the numbers all day long. You're not going to have a good answer. So I think it just falls back to whatever makes the most sense in your brain is okay. And I think that I'm on the same path with you in the sense of urging people to not discriminate or hate or dislike somebody based off their beliefs. Anything can be interpreted differently, and I think if you gave a million people the Bible and every single person ran page to page and then at the end had to write a whatever many page essay or talk about it, everyone would come with a different conclusion. There might be some similarities in there and obviously different things like that, but everyone can draw their own conclusion, and that's kind of the whole point of religion, is to have a base, give you some structure of idea of how you could go about living, and then that way the world makes more sense to you. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer either way. If, say for instance, I'm someone listening and I want to go farther with my belief of Christianity, but I just don't know where to start. What has led you down the path or been the most significant influence with you finding Christ and or being more religious?
So I think there's a couple things for me. Let's see if I can explain this as well as I want to. So for me, like I said, I found Christ mainly when I was at the worst part of my life mentally, right? I was at the point where it's like, I hit the metaphorical rock bottom, and I needed a rock at that bottom. And for me, it was, it was my other coping things as far as, bettering myself, but more so anything in my relationship with Christ. But here's the thing too, you could also make the argument, and I don't want to argue against myself because that's not what I'm saying here, but like, what helped me is, I started off just praying. I still pray nightly. That's what I do. Like I said, honestly, I haven't even been to church I went when I was back in Iowa, but like I don't go to church that often. Not that
Mm.
I have anything against it, but I find the most benefit to my religious views, not even views, but like what benefits me the most in terms of religion is praying and then talking to like-minded people, counsel, right? I'm fine with going to church. I don't dislike it. I'm cool with it, but it's not the thing that benefits me the most or like feeds my soul the most, right? So with that being said, is like what kind of helped me find it was finding like-minded individuals. I got two friends. It's kind of funny. They're both named Christian and they are Christians, but
Mm.
they're the two that I talk to the most about that. I've got others as well, but just I think one is life is so everybody's life is so different, and it does come back to perspective because all life is how you view it. Like you can live the exact same life as me, but if you view it differently, we're gonna think our lives like we're gonna explain our lives differently, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that being said, talking with some friends, some Christian friends, they have gone through things in their life that it's not the same exact. It's not the exact same as me, but it correlates in the same that it's kind of like finding comfort. Religion aside, it's finding comfort that someone's gone through something the same as you. Maybe it's not the exact same, but like they felt the same emotions. They've been through close enough of an experience that you feel closer to them because of that, right?
Yeah.
So I gained strength in my relationship that way. But more so, like I said, the praying thing for me, it was one of those things where like you have to be thankful for what you have in this life. Like I said, or like you were saying, with what you described, those people living in Africa. It's way different than our life, right? Really puts things into perspective about how lucky we are and what a privilege it is to be alive and literally just wake up every day, right? Like you can, like,
Yeah.
God forbid it happens, but I could die in my sleep tonight. You know what I mean? Um, but what a privilege it is to live every day and be thankful. So I think every night I pray, I acknowledge those things. But also too, what really helps me kind of because a lot of people need proof when it comes to religion, right? And you're never gonna get it.
Yeah.
And for me, I had asked for a ton of things, and let's say one of them was, courage to step into who I'm meant to be in this life, right? Well, let's say you believe in God. He's not just going to give you courage, right? He's gonna have you go through experiences in life that help you build courage, right? And then you gain that yourself. So, like, let's say for example, that's what I asked for, and that was one of the things. And he put me through hardships in life. I left my job, started my own business, took a leap of faith, did that. Still ran that business, got a different job at the time. But that's something that like he didn't just you can't just give someone an emotion or like you can't just give someone a trait, right? They have to build it themselves through life experiences. So they're just things like that, like building courage, building strength, all that. But here's to say too, was that God doing that for me, or was that me having faith that He would, and all that faith was powering me to approach situations differently? Like, did God have anything to do with it at all? I believe He did, but some people might have my exact same situation, be like, no, you were just being optimistic about things, and you really manifested that, and that's why.
Mm.
And you're never gonna know, right? But for me, that's the biggest thing is a lot of things started getting better in life when I, was honest with myself, honest with God, and just talked about, what I don't like about my life, what I need to change, asking for help with that change, and then fully believing that it would happen.
So you take more of the stance of rather than like he's taking control of my life, it's more of he's presenting ideas to me in my brain and helping me get to my own
He's
conclusions.
presenting
That's
me
helping me
opportunities to
guide.
fulfill what I need. Yes,
I like that.
like he's not just
Um,
doing things for me, but he's allowing me to ultimately live through these experiences and become who I'm meant to become.
I like that stance on it. I think I struggle personally with the idea that some people would say that it's like God is taking like the steering wheel of my life and making my life what it is, you know. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think at the end of the day life comes down to choices, and that each individual, you wake up every single day and you make choices. So I like the stance of, yeah, maybe he is helping guide those choices. Maybe there it's that angel on your shoulder, right, that is just giving you these ideas to kind of make yourself better. And that's a good thing to believe in, you know. And so I do like that stance on it. And back to your point of being able to talk to people about it, I had found with Buddhism that I don't find very many people that are like-minded around me, you know.
Yeah.
And so how I've been able to kind of deepen my beliefs and or, you know, gain more knowledge is through reading. And because, you know, I'm in middle America, where Buddhism, the origins of it is in South Asia. So it's
Yeah.
like we're far from it. And, you know, a lot of the major where the religion holds the most weight is that area of the world. And so I agree. I think it'd be very beneficial. And I do try and reach out in those ways and have conversations with people. And that's kind of the purpose I would like to have with people on here, is just
Yeah.
to be able to talk about it and learn more about it through that. So, but kind of getting back to the creation story. So you have. So do you think that humans were created with intention? And if so, what's the intention? What is the point of creating
Yeah.
us?
So here's the thing. I was thinking about this earlier when you were talking about, if your viewpoint on, people having intention or not. And here's my thing. Like, if technically, if technically we went with, the idea of God created us to create us, right? And the idea of heaven and hell existing, okay? So if God, how do I want to, how do I view this? Because you could have a whole 7 hour long conversation on this if you wanted to. I kind of view it as this. I kind of view God's gift to man was the gift of life, in the fact of, is there absolute intention, like you're supposed to live life this way? Check, like, is there a checklist you need to mark off to qualify you as a successful human being? Consider that you had a successful life? Absolutely not. I don't think so. I think it was God's gift to people to give us the opportunity to go through this life, which is a blessing. Just the odds of you being born from your parents is a massive mathematical feat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was his gift to people to give us the opportunity and the privilege to live through life and experience these things. Because at the end of the day, like I said, all you get to enjoy in life is experiences. That's the only thing, those memories, those experiences, the only things you truly get to keep. Um, so I think that's my stand on it, and my perspective on it is that was his gift to the people to do that. And as a Christian, your repayment back to him is living a good godly life. But again, we've talked about that with different religions, kind of having all. I mean, they word it differently, but they all basically sum into being a good human being. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, so you take more of the stance, yeah, that God took it upon himself to give us this gift of life, and the best way to repay him for that gift is the belief in him. Do you think that, I mean, a lot of the times people with that belief think that it has to like overwhelm their life, in the sense of they have to do charitable things and donate a ton of money and give back to the church or different things like that. Do you think that is necessary with Christianity, or do you think that truthfully at the end of the day all he wanted in return is just the appreciation for the gift that he bestowed upon us?
Yeah, I definitely think it's the second one. And here's what I'll say: I truly think, religion aside, even too. I mean, this is gonna go into my answer with religion, but religion aside too, I truly believe the greatest thing ever created is love. And that's a broad word that encapsulates a lot.
Yeah.
But you're talking about being a good Christian, doing charitable acts, being a good human being. Being a good human being and believing in Christ is personally all I think he wanted, is the appreciation. Because again, he didn't have to do that, and he did. And obviously, life comes with bad things too. Car accidents, cancer, like all this stuff happens to you. So there's negatives in life as well. But that's what you take with the chance of having positives. But also, I think ultimately it doesn't matter what you do as far as charitable things and things like that, because I think it comes back to love, and love only lives in your heart. And some people are just put into situations that luckily they can, contribute those charitable things, and there's people that can't. But that doesn't make you any more or less of a Christian just by doing those things. Because at the end of the day, too, you could be a perfect human being, which doesn't
Mm,
exist,
right.
but you still sin daily. And the thing that took me like a while to wrap my mind around is in God's eyes, every sin is the same. So like someone having premarital sex versus someone killing somebody in the eyes of God is the same. Which to a human you're like that doesn't make any fucking sense at all. Why would you compare those two? But at the end of the day, we are undeserving of the life that we've been given, in my opinion. But that's literally all it was. Is He gave it? That was His gift to man, was to give us the opportunity to build and experience everything in this life, build into ourselves into who we want to be. And I think literally all He asks for back is the appreciation and a relationship with Him. My thing is like I really don't see a point in, and I'm not trying to push religion on anyone, but I really don't see a negative in trying to build a relationship with Christ. Maybe you try and it doesn't stick, and that's whatever. But I don't see, and I'm not saying just Christianity. I'm just saying in general, I don't see a negative in trying to build that and trying to bless your life or strengthen or better your life by trying to do that. I just don't see a
Yeah.
negative in trying.
Yeah, no, I like the way you broke that down. Is in the sense of, yeah, it doesn't matter what the sin is. It's technically in your belief. That is a big part of it, is that it's technically going against God's will and what He wanted for us. But it's a guideline. He wanted us to follow this pathway, or at least a given guidelines. Otherwise, there'd just be anarchy. I think that's what a lot of people believe in. And obviously, I grew up very similar to you in the sense of, I would go to church on Wednesday and Sundays forever. I think it was till I was 14. We went almost twice a week, if not more. And so obviously life has taken its own path, and that's why I've gotten to the way I am now. But I think truthfully at the core of me, if my personality and just my morals have spawned from Christianity and the original belief that I had and what I was taught and what I was shown. So now I don't hold the same values and beliefs as I once did, but that doesn't mean that I am not still I think I'm a morally just person, and I do think that it's given me a foundation to be a better person. So why is that a bad thing?
Yep.
It's not. So I won't ever neglect or say that it's wrong or anything in between those lines. So, but I do think taking it on as a daily burden for some people might be a lot. Do you need to pray all the time, or just wrestle with the weight of trying to appeal this person because they've given you such the great gift? Have you ever had a time with your spiritual journey where you felt truly tested, where it was like, man, I just don't know. I truly thought I had this all in wraps, and now it's just like, man, everything that I thought is truly being tested.
Yeah. So I want to get pretty. Like I said, I really respect. Not that everyone has to do it, but I really respect when people are, because every person's different, right? I really respect when people are as personal and genuine as possible. So that's what I'm going to be here. I had a conversation with Sui, who you have to tell them who that is. When the time comes.
He'll be on soon.
I
Yeah.
know, I know. But I have a conversation with him. This is probably, I don't know, two or three. This is probably two Christmases ago.
Mm.
And I sent him a voice memo one. It was like 4 in the morning, and I was just sitting there talking with God. And I hadn't talked to Sui in probably 2 days. And I just sent him. I might have it saved even still. I sent him this like, I don't know, 5 to 20. I actually have no idea how long it was. It might have been 5 minutes, might have been 20 minutes. But this voice memo over Snapchat. And I said, there's nothing that really like triggered this. I was just thinking as I do, and started talking about God and thinking about things, and just went on and said, I was at a point in my life where I had a lot of things going for me. I had a business that I built up from scratch that was going well. I had another job that was going well. I had good health. All my friends were doing good in life, all that. But I just felt like something was missing, right? And it could have been a multitude of things that were missing, but it was one of those things where I felt like I had done everything I needed to do to be happy. Well, happy is a fleeting feeling. You can't just be happy all the time. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You can be content, and that's great. Um, but I think I was tested most there when I thought I'd done everything right, and I still didn't feel like I was accomplished. You know what I mean? And maybe
Mm.
accomplished isn't the best word, but like I didn't feel like I was like, okay, if I do this, you'll reach the pinnacle of life and everything will be good. That doesn't happen. Um,
No.
so I was tested in that sense, but I think the way I don't know if bounce back is the right term, but For me, having that relationship with Christ, I was really just I had to kind of step back and do a full you know from top view of my life in general, and just realize how blessed I am. Thank Him for putting those things in my life. Thank Him for um, giving me the mind that I have and developing the mind that I have into seeing things the way that I do, appreciating things that I do, and moving through life the way that I do. Obviously, I've made mistakes in my life too. Who hasn't? But those mistakes have ultimately, had a minimal impact on my future, and I hold myself very, very high in that regard because a lot of people make mistakes that have a lasting impact on the rest of their lives, and that's no shame to them, but that's just a thing. So yeah, in that test of truly not knowing what I was doing wrong, in reality I wasn't doing anything wrong. It just wasn't His timeline for me. And now fast forward 2 years and it all makes sense. But you're never gonna know until you live through it.
Yeah.
So I think having and again, I've always been an optimist in that sense. Even if I've had a ton of self doubt, I've always been optimistic that at the end of the day, life for me is going to happen how it's supposed to, on the timeline that it's supposed to, the way that it's supposed to, however that is. So just having that optimism, that faith that it'll get better, and keep on chugging along. But I think, like I said, I think it's really important to religion aside or not, I think it's important to take a step back sometimes and really acknowledge the privilege that you're living through now.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. The way that I approach my religion and my belief is that it's a day-to-day basis, right?
Mhm.
So even if you have this euphoric, like, oh, I love my life, everything's perfect, the next day do the same process. Think about it again, right? I think that for me, in part of the teaching of Buddhism is that you have the daily self-reflection, and it should be through either meditation or just time that you find self-reflection, and do it as frequently as you possibly can, whether that's 3, 4, 5 times a day. But I think you also do that in prayer, right? Where you reflect on the positives, you thank God for what He has given you, and that's but it's just a test of self-reflection. So I think in order to take time out of your day to truly self-reflect, whether it's to thank somebody or God for giving it to you, or just to self-reflect on yourself and say, hey, good job, like, way to take that on. Maybe it's you go into a business meeting that you're like, I really don't want to do this shit, but you know what, fuck it, let's buckle in.
Yeah.
You get out of it and self-reflect on it. Hey, I'm proud of you for going through that. Even though you didn't want to do it, you did it, you tackled it on. Let's move to the next thing and let's reflect on what's good about life. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that there's a lot of things, and I think that's one of my biggest things that I've always stressed about religion is that they're so intertwined. Everybody wants to label them and put them as their own bracket, but I do think in a big, broad sense that a lot of them are all trying to say the same message. They just have different views and beliefs. So, but no, I think that's great, and we've said it before. You can't truly understand anything until you go through hardship or you fail or you struggle, and so when you get to those deep dark moments where your faith is tested or something that you really believe in gets put on blast,
Yeah.
you got to rely on it the most. So
I think I think at the end of the day too, because everything's going to go through the rock bottom in life. Some people's will be harder per se. It's all subjective, but some people's will be harder than others. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, you have to have faith in something, whether that be religion, whether that be just faith in yourself, whether that be just blind faith that you believe is going to get better. You truly have to have faith in something, or you're never going to make it out of it.
yeah, I completely agree. So turning on to kind of the religious aspect of things, and you've kind of talked about it a little bit, but what do you think happens after you die? Do you truly believe that there's a heaven or a hell, and that you get sent there, and then let's say either way you get there, is it an eternity and you get to spend the rest of eternity in that place, and what does that kind of
Yeah.
look like to you?
So I've thought about this, not a ton, but I don't have a square answer, but I'll walk you through my thinking, right?
Mm.
So obviously, being a Christian, I do believe in heaven and hell and all that. The thing is like I said earlier when I was explaining how complex life is, I truly believe life, whether it be plants, animals, humans, whatever it may be, is just all moving energy, right? Transform energy. And I mean, science even backs that, you know what I mean?
Mm.
So like when you die, your body's just lifeless. Like we've all been to a funeral. It's just a lifeless body, right? And you can kind of feel that too, right? Unfortunately, we've been to, like I said, everyone's been to a funeral for the most part, but unfortunately, I know for a fact we've been to some.
Yeah.
Um, and you just kind of go and you're like, that's not who that person is. It could be
Right.
the body that you've known them their entire life in, but you just know they're not there. You know what I mean? So I think that, and then in that sense, that what you're seeing in that casket is a soulless body. The body's there, but the energy's gone, right?
Yeah.
Energy can't die; it can only transform. So, like for example, like when you light a match, like it's the energy of the match itself being a piece of matter versus the box being a piece of matter. Well, when you swipe it, that creates energy. Well, it's friction, but that creates energy that creates ultimately the flame, right? The flame didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was energy transformed into the flame, right? Obviously, that's a much more broad term and simpler term than what the energy of the soul would be. But I thoroughly believe that your body is here, and that's even what the Bible preaches as well. But like, um, I think personally, my belief is your soul goes, and then when Judgment Day comes, there's a gates of heaven. I don't think it looks like what we think it looks like.
Mm.
I also don't think heaven or hell are like what we think like, because I think it's one of those things where like I said, we'll never understand her. We'll never understand how high of a power God is because we'll never be able to understand him. Just like now, being humans, we'll never fully understand what heaven or hell looks like. But I also thought about it too this way. I was talking to my friend about this probably like a week ago, honestly. I think heaven and hell are its own two separate places. But who's to say that hell isn't actually just okay? How do I want to word this? Because I want to make sure this comes across the right way. Who's to say hell isn't just living your life and not fulfilling what you want out of life?
Mm.
Like going through life your entire life and hating it, but living through that is worse than being dead.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I didn't word that the best, but like, and I don't know if that's something that I believe, but like, I was just talking to a friend about it like a week ago, and that topic came up, or like that conversation came up. Like, what if hell isn't, a fiery pit of just nothing? And what if it is just being stuck on earth forever, living a life that you not necessarily hate, but like being stuck on life forever? Because it's like the thing we said earlier, like, if you don't die, what's the point of enjoying life? Like, how would you enjoy
Yeah.
it if you know it's never ending? So what if hell isn't actually a fiery pit? What if it's just living on earth forever?
Mm.
I don't think that's what I would agree to, but it's a thought that comes up.
No, I like that. And I've always kind of viewed that the same way when I was going through my own spiritual journey with Christianity. Is that I never saw it as like this pearly gates at the top of heaven, and now you get to live in euphoria, where you get
Yeah.
to party all the time, and then hell is just this fiery. I think it's more of like if you would do a deed that was sinful, like truly sin, like maybe murder somebody, or maybe just simply to the fact where you just always lied and always misled and mistreated people incorrectly, that in the afterlife then you get to relive those moments and you are forever cycling through this negative
Yeah.
energy and negativity because that's all you brought to earth,
Yeah.
and versus the positivity where if you constantly work towards a positive way and constantly try to improve people's lives, that you got to live those highs over and over again. But I love what you said about the energy, where it's like, and it's true when you see somebody who's dead and you've seen them living and you've been through all that stuff, whether it's family, friends, or in between, the energy's gone. Like if you
Yeah.
stand next to that casket and you just look at them, there's just nothing. There's no energy. There's nothing.
Nope.
And so
You feel it.
I like your point where it's like energy does have to transfer. It has to
It has
go
to go
somewhere.
somewhere. Yep.
So yeah, and for me, having the personality or the belief that I just think when it ends, it ends. I think that, like I said, we were just been given this gift of life, and that it's truly just circumstantial. And then that when it's over, it's over. And so for me, it's more or less of I'm not trying to work my way into this afterlife. I'm trying to work my way up into that final moment where
Yep.
when I have to look death in the face and say, "Hey, guess what, buddy? You fucked up," or "Hey, you did it.
Yeah.
You lived a truly good life. You were true to yourself and everything,
Yeah.
everybody around you."
I think.
And then I just disappeared into
Yeah. I
existence.
think people too. This is religious aside, but I think people too don't realize because everybody fears death, right?
Yeah.
Um, but my thing is like think of it this way. Let's say you're someone that doesn't believe in the afterlife, right? Unless you die in some agonizing way, like I'm not even going to go into any possibilities, but some sort of accident, right?
Hmm.
Unless you die in something like that, they're always worried about, well, how am I going to feel when I'm dying? I don't think they realize you aren't going to feel it. Like it's like saying this is like, how did you feel before you gained consciousness? How did you feel in your mother's womb? You don't know those things, right?
Yeah.
It's like so if you don't believe in the afterlife, when you're dead, everything just goes black. It's not that you feel dead, you don't feel anything. It's like
Hmm.
it's like trying to see out of your elbow.
Yeah.
It's not a thing, you know what I mean? Like we
Yep.
can't comprehend that, but like that's just what it is. So like if you don't believe in the afterlife, I understand fearing death in the sense of like, missing out on things in life. That makes sense. But in the actual being afraid of feeling death, you're not going to feel anything.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think that's why it's so important to do this, the daily reflection, and do it multiple times through the day, because you never know when your last moment's going to be. And everyone says that, but it's true, man. Like literally, you could be staring down the barrel of a gun. 2 minutes ago, you were safe in your home, and then you're gone. But it's like, I personally believe in those final moments, whether it's seconds, milliseconds, whatever it is, your body has this natural effect that just reflects on everything. And I'm not going to
Oh,
say that I
yeah,
have the article to prove this, but I feel like I've read or heard enough times that
yeah,
when you die, your body naturally releases, whether it's chemicals, molecules, whatever it is.
yeah.
I'm not going to be scientific
Endorphins and
here,
stuff.
but it releases something that your body is like, it's that final like whoosh withdrawal, and you're dead,
Yeah,
you're gone, and everything ceases to move inside of you. I think that it's the brain turning off, and so
yeah,
you truthfully, even if you're not conscious or you're not technically alive, that final release is of your subconscious being like, oh, this is it, I'm dead or I'm dying,
yeah.
and you have those moments to self-reflect on whether life was worth it or not.
So let me ask you this then: do you think there's any chance? And again, we'll never know. But do you think there's any chance that those last, let's just say it is 5 minutes, 7 minutes. Let's just say it's 7 minutes, right? Is there any
Hmm.
chance of those last 7 minutes of your, we agree that it's, your body shutting down, your brain waves, your brain basically turning off, right?
Yeah.
Is there any chance that we believe that, and again, we'll never know, that that 7 minutes of that happening is actually your soul or the energy reliving its last moments within that body because it'll never be in that body again?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely could. And I think that, even with the medical field, one of the things that they always talk about is if someone's truthfully sick or dying, and they have the euphoric moment. I can't remember what the definition is called, but basically, like, say you're in a coma and you wake up, and then for like 15 minutes, you're just overtly aware of everything going on,
Yeah,
and then you just die.
yeah,
It's something in the medical field, they have a term for it, but basically they say they see it all the time when people are dying or from disease, natural cause, whatever it is. They have that euphoric of like, oh, everything's gonna be okay, it's great, I'm here, I'm living, and then the next thing you know, you're gone. So I do think there's some un like, I don't know how to word it,
there's
but
another side,
basically
right?
there's no way to prove it, but everyone knows it's there. And that's religion in a makeup. You know it's there. Everyone knows it's there, but there's no way you can prove it. And so but I think you're right. I think there's definitely some energy or some part of a soul, that leaves your body. And now I'm not saying that I don't believe in a soul per se, but I don't personally think that my soul or my identity of who I became is going to go somewhere else. I think
That's fair.
that's who I am, and that's the last moments I'm going to relive with myself. And at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing that I always stress is that you could have 8 billion followers, you could have the biggest family in the world. At the end of the day, you came into this world by yourself, and you're going to leave by yourself. And the last thought you'll ever have is the self-reflection thought of yourself and what you did in this life. And so all you can do is try and get to that point and be happy with what you've done.
Exactly.
I think that sums it up for me. But I mean, obviously, religion takes its own part, and all the other fun things with that. So,
My biggest thing with the religion is again, don't shame people for believing something else because no one knows who's right, right?
yeah,
And the other thing is don't try to push religion. Some of the most important people in my life are not religious at all. And I
yeah,
don't view them any differently. I don't view them any less because, like I said, they're some of the most important people in my life. I will never push religion on other people. I don't advocate for anyone to do that. I will say though, if something is brought up and questions are asked for you, I just urge anyone listening to answer those as authentically as possible.
I agree.
Some people just
Um,
on it.
no, yeah. Well, that kind of leads into the next thing, and it might be hard to answer. But if
Okay,
there
before we
was,
start, can I use the restroom quick?
yeah, yeah, please, please.
Okay.
I figured we'd run into this, so
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I'm gonna do the same. Fuck it. All right, we're back.
We are back.
I figured that was gonna happen. Um,
And
anyway, so based off of kind of the death conversation, if when it's all said and done, and people like to ask this question, if you could put some words on your tombstone, but what is the one thing that not internally that you want for yourself, but what is one thing that you want people to remember you for when you're gone?
I maybe not remember in like a legacy aspect, but I think what I want to know, okay, what I want to be achieved by my life when I'm dead, right? I want it to be known just by the people that knew me, whether it be a conversation they had with me, something they saw. I want it to be known that nothing, like, without me even having to say it, that nothing on this life is more important to me than the relationships I had with people and the love I had to share.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Because, like I said, I think life has so many facets that are important. But I truly believe that there's nothing more important in this life than love, and that's a pretty broad term. I don't mean love like rom-com movie love. I mean love like truly showing consideration, forgiveness, vulnerability, genuine, like being genuine, all of that towards the people and the things that are important to you. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah. And I think, love has that definition, and a lot of times it gets confused. But yeah, knowing that no matter what, you have this unconscious just respect and careness for somebody. Yeah, I mean, that's just love. I mean, no matter who they are, what they do, you love them, and that's just you grow and live with that. So, I like that. I think I've told you in the past that mine has always been just like I just always want to leave an impression on anyone that I meet.
Mhm.
And whether it's good, bad, or in between. When I'm gone, if I think I don't want people to be like, "Oh, Dylan Ellis died," and be like, "Who?" Or like,
Yeah.
or like, and maybe there's got to be people out there that will, but just like are like, "Oh, that sucks," like just,
Yeah.
but rather than like, "Oh, damn, that's," and just have some type of reaction, like, "Oh," even if it's, "Well, fuck that guy, I hated that guy, thank God he's gone,"
You didn't
but
say have
just
a good impact. You said have a impact on
just
people.
an impact, yes. Have something, because I remember growing up when I was talking to people and they'd be like, "Wait, who's your dad?" And I was like, "Jason Ellis," and they just perk up and they go, "Oh, I know Jason. Like he's a great guy."
Yeah.
That left such a like imprint on my brain is that like you can have that impact on people, even though it's just like
Yeah.
maybe an over the counter conversation. But just if you truly carry yourself in a correct manner and just treat people the way they're supposed to be treated and just have a good overall sense of yourself, I think
Yeah.
that's one of the most flattering things is that when you're
Yeah.
gone
I
or not in the room, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's
yeah.
Dylan. Yeah, that is a great guy." Or like, "Oh fuck that guy. That guy was such a douche." Like, but
Yeah.
something that leaves an
I want,
impact.
yeah, I want to touch on that in the sense of I want people to know, like, because I didn't know this, and you would never know because you would never know unless people tell you, right? I want people to know that, like, whether you realize it or not, whether it be siblings, parents, friends, or just random people on the internet, you have a greater impact on people's lives and their decisions that they make than you think. Like
Yeah,
and I won't name names, but I have a friend on here that like on here. I have a friend in my life that I know I'm his biggest role model in life, and like that comes with pressure, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It can be scary at times, but like I'm glad that I've been through enough things with him, or told him enough things, or helped him enough through experiences in his life that he views me that way. But like I would have like I know we have a good relationship, but I would have never known that he sees me that way unless he told it to me like he did. Like I'm just saying like you have a bigger impact on people than you think. Like a lot of times people will be they'll be so down on themselves, and again I was guilty of that too. But like they'll be so down on themselves that they haven't achieved this or that in life that they just think that they hold no value. In reality, they could be either A, living someone else's dream life, or B, literally be their biggest inspiration to keep going. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Um, I think that conducted a lot of how I wanted to grow up is that
Mm.
my parents are always made me acutely aware that like I have three younger siblings and no matter what I do, they're looking up to
Yep.
me for guidance, whether it's physically asking me questions or just literally watching me do things. And so
Yeah.
that always gave me a huge motivation to give everything I did 110%. And I still think I go through that, you know. And now being a dad, like as much as you don't realize it, every single thing you do, they are going to see and they're going to mimic. They're going to imitate because that's all they know. And, you know, being their parent, especially with me and Darian, we don't have any childcare, nothing. It is literally me or Darian watching Freya, and it's been that for 20 months. Like, and that's
Yeah.
going to be how we parent the next one and everything. So,
Hmm.
I think you get in those points in life where you're acutely aware of that situation, and so you can either step up in that role and you know better yourself so that that person that's following you has a better role model, or you could just take it for granted and be like, well, you know. They shouldn't do that. They shouldn't follow me. They shouldn't look at what I'm doing
Yeah.
because whatever. But I think it gives you a unique opportunity to step up and be a better person.
Oh,
So,
for sure.
um, I know we kind of talked about it multiple times, but I think that to veer it into when you're counting down your final moments on Earth, what check marks do you want to cross off in your own brain? When you have that final conversation with yourself, what is a list of things that you're like, yep, that happened, and that's what I've always wanted, and now I can die peacefully.
Okay, I think I break this answer into two different facets. I have things that I would love to accomplish, but if I don't, that's okay. And then I have other things that like I don't view my life as successful unless these are accomplished. So the first one would be the ones that I'd love to accomplish, but if they don't happen, that's okay. I have certain goals. You know, now that I've gotten into the best shape of my life, I have certain goals I want to meet for those things. I actually have one coming up. Like one of my benchmarks is this next August, my next birthday, right? To get to a certain physique. But if that never happens in life, that's okay. But another one, for example, I've built up. You know, I've since I'm 27 now. Since the time I was 20, I've at least established three or four different businesses. So I think getting to the point with some of those that it actually is like maybe not my only source of income, but like it is a successful running operating business that I can say, hey, I built this from the ground up, whether it be alone or with other people. But I built this from the ground up and made something out of nothing, and that was successful. And that's an accomplishment for me. But those are like tangible items, right? And they matter, and they would be great accomplishments. But I don't have to have those. For
Yeah,
me, for me in my deathbed to be like being like, okay, I I got out of life what I wanted. I'm proud of the life that I lived, and I wouldn't change anything. Obviously, I think people hindsight's 2020. You change some things, but at the end of the day, if you change one thing, it completely snowball into changing your life completely. But there are a few things that I want. So, like for example, you touched on the very beginning of this call. You touched on me never playing college football, right? And that
hmm
is one of my biggest regrets. Do I think I would have been anything insane? No, but I think trying would have allowed me to see how good I could have actually been. And to this day, that's been my biggest regret in life. But I don't like. I'm not mad about it because I literally view it with the perspective and the mindset now that I hope I die with that being the biggest regret of my life.
yeah,
That just that the rest of my life I lived, I didn't. Anytime I thought I could regret something, I just went for it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So that's staying my biggest regret in life. And again, I don't even regret it that much anymore because I learned from it. But that is my biggest regret in life. And like I said, if I die and that stays that means I did what I needed to do with all the opportunities that were put in front of me. So that and but more so than that is like I said, my goal is so simple some might say, and so like straightforward of literally just wanting to bring a family into this life, and whether that be just a partner, whether that be a partner and kids, whether that be whatever, we can get into a whole other kind of conversation on that. But just building something myself, you know what I mean? And like I said, nothing in this life matters to me more than my relationships with people. And I always have friends, I always have siblings, I always have parents, right? But it's just something about finding that partner and building something with them that literally you couldn't replicate it with anyone else. You couldn't replicate it with anything else. No one has the same exact thing as you, and that's something that like you can put your all into something with that other person, and it only builds as strong and as big, metaphorically as big as you make it, right? So like if I'm on my deathbed, I'm like, hey, I had a successful life. It'd be like, okay, I created this family and nourished this family and provided for this family and basically gave my everything to this because that's what I solely wanted to do with my life. That was my sole priority in life all along, and that's what I did, and I lived out my days doing that.
Yeah. A big word that always stands out to me is peace.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, if I can just be at peace, and you can, I think everyone can recall a moment in time in their life, and I hope they can, and maybe you haven't, but where you were truly at peace with everything that was going on.
Sure.
I always recall on me and Darian always take these cabin trips, and we in Oregon we go all the time, and I just remember we were sitting. It's called the Gorge. It's basically these two mountain ranges that lead out into the ocean. We got a huge little Airbnb that literally overlooked everything, and I'm just sitting there watching the sun go down between it, and I'm like, I want in 50, 60, 70 years from now to sit in this exact same spot or a spot like it and look back on everything that I did, the relationships I built, the people I impacted, the life I created, and be at peace with it, and then
Yep.
just move on. And whatever happens after that happens after that.
Yep.
So when you can get glimpses of peace, I think that it is the most euphoric thing in the world. When you can
Sure.
truly look at your life and just be like, yes, I'm doing that, I did that, and just be at peace.
And
So
the thing is, that looks different for everyone, and that's okay.
absolutely.
I think that's the point of it all. I think that's the beauty of it all. Is it looks different for everyone.
Absolutely. But as long as you can go into the next part of whatever happens and be at peace.
Hmm.
Oof, that's it. That's all we're here for is just to
Yep.
find that meaning. So,
You can't do
um,
like okay. There technically is a way to do life wrong, but like I said, every situation or every example you give, there's always gonna be outliers. But like essentially, there's no right or wrong way to do life. You just do life. You know what I mean? Like obviously there is a wrong way to do it, but you know what I mean.
yeah, no, I agree. Um, well, that kind of so the last two questions kind of go more broad and back into the
Mhm.
society like we talked about originally. But what do you think humans misunderstand most about each other?
I think, and I don't blame this on all of them, but okay. I think that I'll answer your question first and then dive into it. I think the biggest thing we misunderstand about each other is how different and similar we are in the same sense. So like, okay, let me
Mm,
break that down. So like, we're similar in the sense that we all have the same key needs, right?
yep.
But we're all put in entirely different situations. Some of us have, and you could name off millions of differences, right? But like, some of us have, for example, two-parent households. Some of us have, we come home to, as kids, we come home to food at the table every night, as compared to some people that haven't eaten in 4 days. And then to more extremes, where like some people are born with disabilities or anything like that. Like we all have the same thing called life, and we have the same needs, but some people have more. Some people have different. Everybody's put into a different situation, right? I also think too, in the sense of everyone's different, and what we don't understand is we may all have the same needs, but um, we all have entirely different lives going on. Yes, we're meeting those or trying to meet those basic needs, but other than those basic needs, everything's completely different. And again, I really think life is yes, it's about what's happening to you and how you react by that, but it's all based off of perspective. Like I said, me and you could it'll never happen, but me and you could live the exact same life, but if we view things from a different perspective, if people were to ask us about our lives, even though the exact same thing happened to us, we're gonna tell different stories, right?
Yep.
So like I don't think people understand that like every single person has a life going on just as complex as yours in their own little world. I will say though too, some people, and I'm not saying I'm no genius by any means, but you always hear the saying of ignorance is bliss. Like some people are just not intelligent enough to understand that. And so they don't worry about these things because they're not intelligent enough to think about them. Which again, I'm not saying I'm a genius by any means, but I have the intelligence and the social awareness and the emotional intelligence to understand that everyone's life is completely different. And a lot of the times, for example, to dwindle it down to one of the simplest situations I can or examples I can give is like, if someone does you wrong, right? There's a chance they just did you wrong because they did you wrong because they didn't like you or something like that. But more likely what happened is they did you wrong because there's something else going on in their personal life, and it says way more about them than it does about how they feel about you.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah.
Um, you hit the nail on the head for me with that one. Judgment is the biggest word that I get out of that, and no one is free of that sin. Everyone judges
Oh yeah.
everybody, but I think it's the fact, and I've been trying to do with my self reflection is also try and put myself in people's shoes, as cliche as that is, but. I mean, it is so easy to judge people. It is so easy to see somebody on the sidewalk that has a sign that says, whatever it says, need money, need help, and just be like, huh, they must have just pissed their life away, huh? And it's just so easy for us as humans to take an initial glance at somebody and just judge them to their core. And so I just think as humans, yeah, like you said, it's just we don't need to live like that. And I think it's okay to have judgment, but I think it's also necessary to react properly to it and being like, you know what, oh, that guy must be a bum, and then being, having that self-reflection in your own head and being like, well, I don't know what they're going through, so it's not fair. And I think one of the biggest teachings with Buddhism is having the right thought. Having the right thought eliminates that judgment, where you can put yourself in universally into other people's shoes, because you don't judge them off of their looks, or you can only judge them off of their character and what they
Yeah.
do, moving forward with their actions. So no, I completely agree with everything you said. um, on that premise, what do you think the world needs more of from people, and how do you try and embody that with yourself?
I think two things initially jump out to me, and maybe it's because one is because I've had self growth, and again, life is all about the perspective that you have personally, right? So I'm answering this in the sense of like how I would answer this, right?
Mm,
Um, I think two words immediately jump out to me, and one's because of something that growth that I've made, and the other one is based off what I value the most in this life, right? So the one word that I'll say of what I've gone through growth with is people need more humility, right? No one is perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. But people are afraid. It's gotten to the point now where people are so afraid of being embarrassed, um, and making mistakes that they won't try to do anything. And then they live through, like we talked about earlier in this call, they live through an entire life, don't do anything different, and then they get to their deathbed and they wasted their entire life because they were scared of being judged. And like you said, judgment's gonna happen. I mean, I without even realizing, I probably people watched 30 people at the gym today without even realizing. You know what I mean? Like it's just
yeah.
it's just what we are as humans. But I think humility is one, understanding that like no one is perfect. That's part of life is making mistakes, right? You just don't make ones that you can't come back from because those exist too. But more so, I think what the world needs, and this is going to sound so cliche, but again, I thoroughly will die on this hill that the most important thing in this life is love, and that's not a feeling, that's a choice. Love is 10,000 things. Like I said, it's forgiveness, vulnerability, acceptance. It's so many things. It's not just a feeling of love like you see in the movies and stuff, right? But I thoroughly believe that, and love doesn't just have to be like, okay, I love this person, I'm going to do anything for him. That's not that. That's not what I'm saying. Love is just, for example, that person that you randomly saw seeing on the street, not doing what you can to not judge them. Off of initial reaction, you're going to judge them. It's human nature. You're going to do that. But understanding that you don't know where they came from, you don't know why they're there, and showing them, you don't have to be buddy buddy with them. You don't have to give them money. You don't have to do anything like that. But showing them compassion because they're another human being as well, and showing them consideration that like they are at a tough spot in their life, but it might not even be their fault, and it might be. And even if it is their fault, you still have to, at the end of the day, we're all humans learning. Some people have been dealt hands that they don't really have a shot, and some people have been dealt, golden tickets. But I think more just whether you're an introvert, extrovert, or anything between, you don't have to necessarily talk to people, but just showing people compassion and consideration and love for each other is something that we need more of. And I hate to be a pessimistic or a pessimist, but it's one of those things that I don't see happening in on the planet, especially in the U.S. because everything's about being better than everyone else, and that's not even just the U.S. But like it's just I think ego and greed get in the way of what actually is important, and social media makes it worse. A lot of things make it worse, but there are a lot of negative emotions and negative perspectives that overpower and or cloud the simple terms that could just make life a lot easier. If everyone just, like I said, sounds cliche and sounds cheesy, but like just spread more love.
Yeah. Um, and I've always said that leading by example, I think, is something that we don't find very much anymore. It's very easy to be hypocritical and want someone to act, behave, or do something, but then when it comes time for you to do it yourself, it's very easy to just
Oh
turn the
yeah.
blind eye and say, well, I mean, they should have been doing it, and they're, whatever the case may be. And I, like you said, judgment, I think everyone has. And I have an example of it. It was the other day I was driving around in the work truck just going to an appointment, and this lady just runs out into the street and comes and knocks on my window, and I could tell she doesn't have any teeth and kind of had some raggedy clothes, and I'm like, bro, is she really knocking on my door for money? Like,
Yeah.
okay. And so, but that's my initial judgment. But trying to be a better person, I rolled down my window and said, hey, how you doing? And she goes, oh, do you by chance have a business card on you? I would really be interested in getting a flooring estimate. And I'm like, well, hell yeah. And, got my
Yeah.
business card and gave it to her. And I was like, have a blessed day. And she's like, you too. And it's just like, it's not about your initial judgment that matters. It's about how you react. And so
Yeah.
my initial judgment was like, oh my God, a homeless person is literally coming up to bang on my window to ask for change. But no, it was just somebody who saw my logo and wanted, to ask me about something and give her
Yeah.
a business card. So, um, yeah, I think that's a big message that we can both portray here is that it's okay to have, judgment, and try and, work on that daily and not to judge. But it's okay to have it. It's more about the action rather than the thought. So, all great things. Yeah. As you know, we could talk on and on and on about these things forever.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's time for a little bonus question, if you
Oh
don't
boy.
mind.
Go right
I
ahead.
This has got to be my bonus question for everyone, and whether you have an answer or not, I'd just like to hear your own opinions. How do you think that the pyramids were built?
Oh man, I should have expected something like this. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I know it's one of the seven wonders of the world. This is a question that I've literally never thought about in my entire life.
Hey, that's
Uh,
okay.
no, and that's one of those things where like I will say though, with like of what I've heard and like what I think, I don't necessarily have an answer in how I thought they were made. I do think it's super interesting though, all the different conspiracies that you hear because one, we're never gonna know. It's kind of like the religion thing, but two, it's
Yeah.
like for example, like some people would be like, okay, well they did this, this, and this. It's like, well, do we think people had the intelligence to think of ideas like that back then? And even if they did they have the tools to do that? And then all this. So I don't have an actual answer for you on how I think they did it. I'd have to do some research and maybe down the road I come back on for another episode. You ask me the same question again, but.
Mm.
I do think it's super, super interesting to look into those things because again, we're never gonna know, and it's like it's one of those things too. Where like when people talk about the moon landing, it's like if we could do it, then why haven't we replicated it? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I always like it because it's even, as you can tell from my list of questions, I don't know why, but I'm always drawn to the questions that don't have answers or don't have correct answers, shall we
Yeah.
say. And I think that's the biggest thing of why I went and got my history degree, and that's why I spent all my free time reading history books or watching history videos, is I love the questions that we can't answer because everyone has their own belief. You can look at the same data no matter how it's presented and go, I have a different conclusion. So
Yeah.
that's why I love it. I love it so much. I mean, me personally with history, I have, or with the pyramids, as you know, I have an Egyptian sleeve. If I could have lived out my biggest dreams in being an Egyptologist, that would have been the coolest thing ever. But I don't have $500,000 to get a PhD and
Yeah.
or go live in Egypt or any of the other things and above. And I'm
Yeah.
not smart enough. I'm just not. That's just the reality of life. Something I had to learn out about myself. But it's so interesting. So I always like to ask people that because you could have 8 million different answers and there's not a right one.
Well, I'll dive into that even further for you. So let's say that someone were to lay out exactly how like they thought it was built. They lay out all this evidence, all this logical thinking, all this critical thinking, and lay out this is how this is how they did this is how they built this, and this is how it was ultimately built. They lay it out and it all makes sense. Even if it makes sense, that doesn't mean it's right.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It could make 100% sense. The evidence could back it, and it's most likely right, but it doesn't prove that it actually is right. You know what I mean?
Yes. Unless you can recreate it and show
Yep.
Model A equals
And
Model B.
and the thing is, even if you recreate it, who's to say you recreated it the same exact way that they built the original? You'll never know.
Yep, I
Yeah.
agree. And I think the most interesting thing about history is that the only way to make it historical is that if you have evidence, which means that you have a physical depiction, a language, or any, because myth, aka the
The
verbal
spoken word.
history,
Yeah.
is not considered factual and is
Yeah.
not historical. You have to have a
Yeah.
physical evidence, whether it's a written language or a inscription, a design, or an illustration, for it to be factual.
And sometimes that's
And
not even enough. Because
exactly.
I know like they've found the exact area where Christ was crucified. Like
Mm.
it's an actual place, but that doesn't necessarily like fully prove anything. You know what I mean? Like it does if you want to go along with it, but like, or I shouldn't say go along with it because it is a religion, especially one that I coincide with. But like, there's just some things in life we're never gonna know, and I think that's okay. I think that's super cool actually.
Yeah. Um, and it's the same thing with death, right? We'll never know. You're never going to get told what's the moment, the date, anything, the time. I think the things in life that have the most mystery around them or have the inevitability is the some of the craziest parts of life. And
Yeah.
so, I don't know. I think I've always, when I was younger, I was like, wouldn't it be the coolest thing in the world to be the guy who figured it all out, you know?
Yeah. And then you
Thousands
get
have
into it and you're like,
tried.
okay, maybe not.
Yeah, now it's like, ah. I mean, even from my personal, not to, I won't dive too deep into it, but and I'm gonna sound like a wackadoo, but I already do. So it's like I think that the Egyptians inhabited something that was already existing. I
Okay.
think that the pyramids and everything around it was there, and they just inhabited it.
Yeah.
So, and that comes from stemming of, do you have you ever done any research or heard anything about cataclysms?
Mm-mm.
And so essentially, we're always on a constant cycle of cataclysms, whether it's humans, our ancestors down the line. We have millions and millions of years of people that looked like humans but weren't Homo sapiens, just like us.
Mm-mm.
It's basically you constantly have this cataclysmic event that constantly happens, whether it's volcanoes, meteor impacts, tsunamis, just all these different things. But the Younger Dryas happened 12,800 years ago, which basically was the melting of the icial glaciers. So where we grew up in the Midwest, in Canada, and all those places, if
Yeah.
it never melted, we would have never been able to live there because it was two
Exactly.
miles of ice.
Yeah.
So essentially, what happened during that time is that something happened, and it's highly debated whether it's a meteor impact or if it's just a natural thing that the Earth took place. But the fact of the matter is that glacial, it all melted, and that's why you have the Great Plains and all those things, because it was like a mudslide. It was
Yeah.
literally those, they melted, it got to a certain point and wiped it. And then the sea levels rose over 400 feet. So you have this time period from 12,800 to 1,600 years ago that basically rewrote history as we know it. So from there, they can conclude that any humans that were living there before basically went through this enormous test of cataclysmic event, and basically this is the world that we live in now. It has shaped from there. So it kind of begs the question of, and this kind of leads into a question for you, is that every single religion, whether it's extinct religion, modern day religion, anything in between, has a flood theory,
Yeah.
right? Where Christianity has Noah's Ark, and so on and so forth. We could list a ton of them, but everywhere around the globe they have their own flood theory. And this person is where I think it comes from, is the Younger Dryas impact theory, or just Younger Dryas theory, where the sea levels rose up to 400 feet. And where do humans live? Where are the biggest cities on the planet to this day? They're on the coast,
Yeah.
right? So let's say you have civilizations and cities and everything else. They're on that coast, and all of a sudden 400 feet gets it's just gone. It's just completely engulfed and
Yeah.
flooded, and that is where you get the flood myth from. That's my personal take on it, and why you can
Yeah.
say Noah's Ark, I think is a myth, but I think it's factual in the sense that it did happen in that part of the world where
It's just
Noah
it was
took
told
place.
differently.
But it
This
was just,
It
yes.
happened, but the story didn't happen. It didn't happen as it was told.
Yes. And everyone kind of in their religion has their own Noah's Ark and their creation. But I think that's true. I think that there were people all over the planet that were living on the coast or living off the coast, and this crazy catastrophe happened. This cataclysmic event wiped out maybe everything they knew, and there was only a couple survivors left in there. That was their own Noah. Um,
So okay, so your theory or your hypothesis is that the pyramids were created basically by cataclysm, basically.
it was created by a previous society that was wiped out by a cataclysm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And we are left with the remnants. And now once again you can say, well, where's your proof? Once again, we didn't have a written language in
Yeah.
anywhere in the world until about 6,000 years ago. So that's all we're going off factual for civilizations.
Mhm.
And they're saying that the only way that they could be classified as civilizations is if they were advanced enough to create their own language and inscribe these languages and be able to
Yep.
communicate. Who says that that's true? Because
Yeah.
if you look at today's society, look, if we literally went back before the Industrial Revolution, and now we have iPads, phones, like even this conversation, 200 years from now, no one's ever going to be able to prove that you and me just sat down for 2 hours and talked, because it's
Yeah.
going to be over an internet, over a web that won't probably exist in 200 years from now. So who's to say that it didn't happen? They just had technology, or were at a point in life where they didn't need to scrape it on the fucking walls. You know what I'm saying? Like, or even books. Books have disappeared. You talk about the Library of Alexandria, where they said all this knowledge of the ancient past was kept, and then it was all destroyed, and now we've lost all that knowledge from our previous endeavors with human society. So it's just like, and it just goes back to you can't prove it. There's no way. It's just a theory. It's just what you think. But that is kind of because we can't replicate it. The people who the first dynasty or fourth dynasty, I think it is, Egyptians who are claimed to build it, said they built it in 25 years, and it's like, how? No one can even create it now. And when you go to factual evidence, where, like you said, the only way it's historically true is if you can prove it with writing, whatever else.
Yeah.
They've never talked about it in the Egyptian language. They've never found anything that says, hey, this is how we did it.
Mhm.
And if you've created the biggest monument on human earth,
Yeah.
especially 5,000 years ago, don't you think somebody was taking notes?
Yeah.
I mean, we're just going to say we just built this thing that no one has ever been able to replicate or even get close to, and we're just going to not talk about it or write it and nothing?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just me. So, I don't know. But that's a whole nother tangent that I don't want to bore anybody with. But, yeah. And like I said, I would love sometime, and I hope this gets to the point where it reaches where I can bring on people who are extremely knowledgeable in that history out of things, and let's get their point of view, and I can learn more from them. But anyways, well, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's not the easiest thing on a Tuesday at 7 o'clock to jump on and talk for hours on end. But like I said, you were the first guy that came to mind without a doubt, and we've had plenty of these conversations before. So I know that we probably felt like we were reiterating things to each other that we already knew, but that was besides the point. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and be vulnerable and share your thoughts.
Yeah, for sure, man. Like I said, I think it's an honor that you thought of me. We've had tens of thousands of these conversations. Like, not actually, but like, we talk about this stuff all the time. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I'm going to yap, and I'm gonna be genuine, because I don't believe in being anything else. So, like I said, it means a lot. You want to be on. But yeah, no, it was good to talk through these conversations that you don't have on a daily basis. A lot of people, a lot of people go through their lives not talking about a single one of these topics. So. No, it's good to hop on, talk to someone, especially someone that I care about as highly as you. And we'll see what the future holds, and see if some more questions come up, and see if I end up back here again.
Yeah, no, I think we'll have to run it back, and I think over time I'll try and dissect and shape these questions a little bit better to get the most out of people. And who knows, maybe we can just come back on and just talk about life again. So,
Yeah.
and we do that every day anyway. So,
We're done talk, so
yes, sir.